Next up, let's recognize trade and economic law consultants. Let's give them a round of applause. UNDP, the team from UNDP, where are you at? And last but not least, Poster Kenya. And so, of course, the Postmaster General is here. Thank you so much for the support. And I know as we go along, we will call you up on stage, and we cannot wait to hear from you. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me now to first call up one of our sponsors as well from UNDP, the Regional Director, Madam Ahuna Eziokonwa, to come up on stage and give her opening remarks, after which I will invite the Chair of KenInvest, then the PS. I stand guided from the team from UNDP. All right, advice that we are expecting her, so we'll just hold that as we go along. So before I take it up to the principal secretaries, allow me to really appreciate, I think on behalf of the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, KenInvest as well, for the behind the scene work and just piecing this together. So I think allow me to appreciate and welcome and recognize KenInvest. Let's give them a round of applause. And to speak on behalf of the entire team, that's the board and management of KenInvest, allow me to welcome on stage Madam Sally Mahiu, who's the chair KenInvest, to welcome us.
Thank you very much. Mine is very, very simple. To simply welcome you to this very, very important conversation and dialogue. And having gone through the list of panelists, the topic, I know that this is not just another afternoon. This is going to be power-packed and loaded, and we're going to receive as much as we need to take this conversation of climate forward. So I don't want to say much because I know there's a lot to be said this afternoon by those who have been invited to speak. So just allow me to thank you for accepting our invitation and accepting to come even on time. I know we didn't start exactly, but thank you very much, and please feel welcome from the entire board of Kenya Investment Authority. I am their chairperson. Our management team, our CEO is somewhere, together with the entire management. We've prepared for this day, and we know it shall not be in vain. Thank you very much, everyone. Should I welcome somebody else, or is the MC coming? The PS. It is my great honor at this point. I always say wherever I go that I joined the Kenya Investment Authority, which sits under the parent Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Investments. And I found some of the most able, sharpest, most brilliant persons in this particular sector. Our CS Moses Kuria, and also my PS Hassan Abubakar. It is my pleasure to welcome him now to take us to the next level of this conversation. Thank you very much. Welcome, PS Abubakar.
Thank you, Chair of KenInvest. I don't know whether you are describing me or... PS Juma Mukwana, PS for Industry. Can I say all protocols duly observed? Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon. For the visitors, welcome to Kenya. Welcome to your home. You've heard the President today morning said that Kenya has been scientifically proved to be where humanity began. So welcome home, and welcome to the country of great marathoners. Also welcome to Nairobi. It's the only city in the world with a national park. This is for the visitors, not for and of course surrounded by the forest canopy. And welcome to this session. This session convention that has been organized on the ambit of the Africa Climate Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, the significance of an African green and climate positive economic growth that comes as a result of responsive and impact investment and trade policy cannot be understated. For our countries to realize their economic potential and able to unlock, tap, and exploit the investment capacity out there, we need to apply a pragmatic approach to this discourse. His Excellency the President today morning said that we have assembled here to define and refine our position on effective climate action to save the planet, and by extension, to save the lives and livelihoods. But the actions to be very effective, climate investing and climate financing must be at its core. African countries present the world's investment frontier because of its unique features, its unique assets, and its economic potential. But the risk perception and the information shortages has lowered the investor confidence, attracted lowest capital, and the small capital which has been attracted, it has come at a highest cost of capital or excessive cost of capital. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is the most vulnerable continent in the world. Half of its GDP is exposed to climate change. But the funding gap, the sustainable funding gap, is only 1.6 trillion by 2030. That means it is 194 billion US dollars annually. 194 billion US dollar annually is 7% of the African GDP. But 194 billion US dollar annually, it's only 0.2% of the global assets under management. Only 0.2%. 194 billion which is needed annually is only 10.5% of Africa asset under management. So there's capacity on this side, there's money. And on this side, there's a lot of potential. The issue is how do we make sure the potential meets the capacity, or the capacity meets the potential. And we are seeing there's a delayed action. There's an opportunity cost in that delayed action. So that delayed action is not justifiable. I'm a lawyer by profession. Justice delayed is justice denied. So we are denying these opportunities to meet the capacity. So I'm looking forward for a great discussion and conversation on how to bridge this gap. Is it a data issue? Is it that we need more data or better data to make an assessment of sustainability and bankability of this investment opportunity? Is it lack of financial instruments that are properly governed and properly structured? Is it the lack of capacity to intermediate, lack of capacity of our DFIs, African DFIs, to intermediate between the international finance and the opportunities that exist? Is it about our investment landscape, which needs to be harmonized and standardized in Africa? And I think the FCFTA has come up with an investment protocol with an aim of harmonizing the African investment landscape. Is it about de-risking? Is it that the private investment need to be de-risked more for this capital to flow? All that will be part of your discussion on the panelist. It is now my singular responsibility and honor to welcome someone who is not here, the CS, who has apologized, but I will welcome him after the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When a PSC deserves a round of applause, please. And rightfully so, we register the apologies of the Cabinet Secretary, the Ministry of Investments, Trade and Industry. I think there's an ongoing bilateral currently with the Ghanaian delegation with the President, so he'll be able to join us as well at the tail end of this function. Now advised that on behalf of the Regional Director, UNDP, we'll hear from Becky Bembe, who's the Economic Advisor at UNDP.
Thank you. Is it on? Sorry. All right. Thank you very much, Program Director. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the RBA Director, Ms. Ahuna Aziakona, firstly, I would like to extend her apologies. She is stuck on another equally important event. So apologies on that behalf, but I have her notes now, and I will quickly whiz through her message on her behalf. Thank you for the great initiative to connect trade and investment to climate. This is an area that has not been effectively studied and prioritized for policy action, and I'm proud that Africa is spearheading the nexus, and even more, that the identification of action that will be needed to ensure that trade, investment, and industrialization contribute to climate action. I have 3 main points to make. The first one is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area gives us a solid framework to calibrate action to ensure that Africa trade, investment, and industrialization regimes support climate action. Second, we must invest to promote renewable energy, infrastructure, energy-efficient technologies, sustainable agriculture, and environmentally friendly manufacturing processes. And third, climate finance mechanism must make resources available to promote responsive trade, investment, and industrialization. On the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, we must ensure that the growth in intra-Africa trade in goods and services is climate smart in production movement across the continent and promotes responsible consumption and is also sensitive to carbon emissions. The Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is on a steady path to effective implementation, with 54 African Union member states having signed and 48 of them having deposited their instruments of ratification. Protocols on investment, competition, and intellectual property rights were approved by the Assembly of Heads of State. We need to ensure that value chains like agriculture, agro-processing, automotive, pharmaceuticals, transport and logistics build an industrial base that is climate smart. UNDP is working with private sector to strengthen preparedness to seize these opportunities with the Secretariat in Accra at the regional level and with other member countries. Africa accounts for less than 4% of greenhouse emissions and yet is most negatively affected by climate change. Trade is a major contributor to carbon emissions, and according to WHO, greenhouse gases released by the production and transport of traded goods and services represent on average 20 to 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The international transport sector alone generates 12% of emissions. Studies on the environmental consequences of the Continental Free Trade Area concedes that the agreement could lead to a marginal 0.3% increase on emissions, but at the same time it will also improve air quality. Moving to investment, we need to promote renewable energy, infrastructure, energy-efficient technologies, sustainable agriculture, and environmentally friendly manufacturing processes. Africa's growth has been characterized by heavy reliance on natural resources and low productivity across most sectors. UNDP's strategic plan for 22-25 identifies development finance as an enabler to scale up development impact and also articulate a moonshot to promote investment of over $1 trillion USD to public expenditure and private capital in SDGs. As an organization, UNDP's Energy Moonshot is committed to reduce by 50% its carbon footprint by 2030 in the first 2 years. UNDP's Moonshot initiatives invested $3.2 million from corporate, regional, country offices to fund 36 projects, mainly focusing on energy efficiency. UNDP is promoting private sector investment in SDGs through SDG Investor Maps. This is a market intelligence tool that identifies investable solutions to pressing SDG needs. It has been utilized in 10 African countries. Analysis of Investor Map shows less than 10% of investment opportunities relating to energy, solar technology, and project developers, waste management, as well as agriculture. Investment opportunity areas are highest in East Africa. Now turning to the last area, which is investment and mechanism for climate finance. At COP15 in Copenhagen, developed countries committed to the goal of mobilizing 100 billion each year for climate action in developing countries. The commitment was reiterated in Paris Agreement. Since 2008, UNDP has been supporting over 140 countries to access 3.2 billion in grants covering adaptation, mitigation, forests, and more, contributing to the priorities out under countries' NDCs. At the same time, UNDP has been supporting ministries of finance to access new sources of finance, from international funds to private investment, and to better integrate climate change and link environmental concerns into economic and financial policy. As I conclude, under the climate promise, UNDP is continuing to assist countries to identify their financial requirements, to plan for and mobilize resources, including from innovative mechanisms such as green bonds and carbon markets. UNDP is supporting the development of financing strategies for countries' NDC implementation plans. In the strategies, UNDP promotes the critical role of resources leveraging mobilization of a blend of both catalytic capital and attracting private sector capital. As of April 21, UNDP was supporting 118 countries on NDC enhancement under the climate promise, including 38 LDCs, 28 small island states, 14 higher emitters, and 45 countries in fragile states, in fragile settings. This represents about 28% of the global emissions. Thank you very much, Program Director. That was the message from the RBA Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabembe. Much appreciated. And we cannot wait to hear more from you during the climate finance mechanism panel that will be coming up. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Some bit of context setting, and now we are ready to dive deep into our discussion on the key thematic areas. Just to give you an overview, we'll be discussing on the green investments and technology. That will be led by Madam Tracy Lane from KPMG. Next, we'll look at the climate finance mechanism with Mr. Peter Ngere. And after which we'll have the conversation on investment, trade and development with Dr. Tate Moyer from Oxford. And last but not least, we'll have now the conversation and the signing of the letters of intent. And thereabout, we'll also hear from our Cabinet Secretary and, of course, Dr. Peter Mathuki from the ESC. So there you have it. Are you all ready to start? Thank you very much. It's only at this point that I allow you to just know who's on your left and right, exchange some bit of business cards, because we are about to hit the ground running. So here goes. Good stuff. Okay.
And then when I'm done, I'll hand it back to you.
Absolutely. And then I'll do the next. Yeah.
Mr. Laban.
Laban, yes. Okay. So I'll just introduce you and then.
Do I need to press this to speak? Do I need to press
So you
that?
press that.
Sorry, it should be green. It should be red when I speak or not?
It should be red. So now it's on. Okay. Very well. So we're now ready to start our first panel. Our first panel will be so as we have Trace on stage, maybe I can have Mr. Ngere, Tate Moyer to just please join me on this side table here. Maybe have Patrick, Ted, and myself to just come to this table on my right here. Okay, here goes. Honored and glad now to introduce to you my co-moderator and our facilitator for this session, looking at green investments and technology. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to Madam Tracy Lane, the Associate Director from KPMG, to take it out from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Tracy Lane. I'm an Associate Director at KPMG East Africa, where I lead our climate change, renewable energy, and sustainability portfolio across the region. I'd like to invite my panelists up, and then I'll give a few remarks to set the scene before we dive into the question and discussion session for the panel. So first, I'd like to invite Dr. Juma Mukwana, Principal Secretary, State Department for Industry. Ms. Fatou Haidara, Deputy Director General for UNIDO. Ms. Floris Mukabana, Acting CEO, Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. Ms. Phyllis Wakiaga, Senior Advisor, Industry and Commerce, Tony Blair Institute. Ms. Effie Akinyi, Project Development Lead, Sanovation Limited. And Mr. Walid Hareb Al-Falahi, CEO, UAE Trade Center. Welcome. So our first panel session this afternoon focuses on green investments and technology. Green investment means investing activities aligned with environmentally friendly business practices and conservation of natural resources. Given the climate crisis and the very real and pressing impacts of climate change, green investment places heavy emphasis on climate action, both mitigation and adaptation. Green investments can support climate mitigation efforts by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting sustainable practices across various sectors and along the value chain. Additionally, investments in climate adaptation measures, such as climate resilient infrastructure and sustainable agriculture, can enhance the continent's ability to cope with climate-related challenges. And both of these investment needs are critical not only for climate action, but also for the overall development and industrialization of Africa. By embracing green investments, Africa can unlock its sustainable development potential, address energy challenges, mitigate climate change, drive economic growth, and improve the well-being of people and communities while preserving the continent's natural resources for future generations. It is very critical that as Africa continues to develop economically, that it does so along climate-compatible pathways. According to the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, if developed economies reach net zero, but emerging economies build out using fossil fuels, by 2050, 75% of all emissions will be generated by developing countries, and we will still overshoot our global climate targets, reaching a projected global temperature increase of 2.5 degrees Celsius, well beyond our targets. It's important to note also that green investment can support, and it's imperative that it supports the just transition for Africa, whereby economic development is not slowed down or reversed, but rather is accelerated and offers an opportunity for high-quality employment, skills development, technology transfer, and greater economic opportunities for communities and individuals. So to date, renewable energy is the main sector for green investment in Africa and globally. For example, global new investment in renewable energy skyrocketed in 2023 for the first 6 months to $358 billion. But other key sectors for green investment include sustainable agriculture, waste management, sustainable transport, energy-efficient buildings, sustainable water and sanitation, and biodiversity conservation and natural resource management. As we heard earlier, Africa's share of investment, especially private investment, lags substantially behind other world regions, standing at around 4.5% of global total financing flows for climate action. That gives us an opportunity to scale that up, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And this panel will explore that and the policy environment and other mechanisms to spur investment in green technology and trade. So if I may start with a question then for the Principal Secretary, Dr. Juma. The ministry's role is to establish a conducive environment for trade, investment, and industrial development. What kind of policies is Kenya putting in place to position Kenya and the wider region as a destination for climate investment?
Thank you. Very loud. Okay, thank you. Let me take this opportunity to invite you, all of you to Kenya and to Africa as we dialogue and discuss about the issues of climate change. We, as Kenya, we are very, very cognizant of the fact that we are punching below our weight. If I talked about the African environment, generally, if you look at Africa, our 55 countries have a population of 1.2 billion, basically 17% of the world population. But our share of manufacturing, which is, I think, important to put in the context, is only about 3%. So we can see the potential, the gap that we have seen. As a government, through the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, we recognize that manufacturing is very critical to our work. We have a large number of unemployed youths. We have a lot of raw materials that are either going to waste. You'll appreciate that as we talk, for a lot of our agricultural produce, we are losing up to 40% of our agricultural produce through post-harvest losses. So you can see that even just by saving, if we could just have that post-harvest loss, we have a lot of raw materials. So this government came to office with promise that will spur manufacturing. Manufacturing as a contribution to GDP has also quite declined from about 20% a few years back to where we are currently. So we have come up with very ambitious plans to try and spur manufacturing, and I will go straight to that. one of the issues that we've done through the policy environment is the issue we call Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. Through this initiative, all government agencies are required by law to buy up to 40% of their requirements from Kenyan-made goods. So that means that then if you manufacture here, you have preferential treatment in terms of when the government is buying. We have also put up a policy on local content, which means that if you're importing something that we can make here, either the whole of it or part of it, then there will be policy incentives. For example, those of you who have been following up our debate know that this year we have even introduced import levy on some products that we can make. For example, clinker. We have a lot of limestone deposits that can last us up to 40 years, but we have been importing clinker to make cement. So this financial year we have put some taxation measures to say that if you want to import something that we can make here, then there will be a 10%, 17% export levy, import levy that will make it a little bit more uncompetitive for you to bring produce into this country. The other issue I've talked about local content, and what it means is that if you're importing a knife, I want to simplify it. You don't have to bring the whole knife. If you bring the metal part, and then we make the wooden part here, then our taxation is such that the part that you make locally will be taxed at a lower rate. So within the automotive sector, for example, we have used this, where we are saying if you bring completely knocked down kits, the parts that you are able to make locally, and even some of them have been gazetted within the motor vehicle sector, we have up to 34 parts that we have gazetted that you can make locally, and we have capacity for local making. Within the motorcycle sector, we have up to 14 parts which you have to make locally, and this will attract a lower taxation. So what I would say is that the potential is here. For us, when we look at the trends globally, we know that industrialization started off in Europe, it moved to the US and that side, and because of costs, a lot of it got relocated to Asia, and we can see that the hurricane is blowing in the direction of Africa. So we are very, very excited as a country that we are putting in a lot of measures to really support those who want to manufacture here, and I'll be talking more about other areas that we have invested, including issues of special economic zones, export promotion zones. We have a lot of manufacturing space. In the last 3-4 months, I think the Cabinet Secretary has gazetted 5 new special economic export promotion zones that have now gone up for construction. I think construction for those parks has already been advertised, so you can see that there is a lot of work. Let me leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite a range of measures, from government procurement rules to fiscal incentives, and also incentivizing value-added activities for local manufacturing and assembly, as well as the export processing zones. So quite a number of measures to position Kenya. Ms. Haidara, if I may ask you a question next. Africa currently receives the lowest share of investment compared to other world regions and lags behind in terms of industrialization. With the climate crisis leading to a call for increased investment in these climate-compatible growth sectors, there's now an increased focus on scaling investments in Africa. Do you see climate change as a new paradigm shift for Africa's industrialization? And what role might technology play in that?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. As you mentioned, UNIDO is the specialized organization of the UN. Therefore, I would like to start by saying that industrialization actually is a process. It's a process, it's complex, it requires a holistic approach. And for us, one of our main partners when we talk about industrialization, of course, the government. We have a very fruitful cooperation with the government of Kenya, but private sector play a key role in when you talk about industrialization. And when we talk about investment, we think of private sector. And to To promote private investment, it takes enabling environment. And with the current challenges, I think we should promote investment that are in line with green growth. And also, I see industrialization playing a critical role in the new paradigm shift. Well, what we need to do is to identify innovative areas where we should invest. I can offer a few points, a few ideas that we can explore. One is, of course, the policy level, because as I said at the beginning, partnering with private sector is to enable an environment where we can promote green investments in this context of climate change. One area of smart investment, I would say, is to invest in green technologies. The transfer of technologies is critical. The second area to invest, we talk about youth employment, we talk about creating startups. Entrepreneurship development requires skills development, and this is an area where we should invest. The third area for investment would be infrastructure. Not only physical infrastructure like roads, ports, but also digital infrastructure. I think today we cannot talk about investment promotion, competitiveness without talking about digitalization. These are three key areas where I would say are smart investment areas. What could be the role of UNIDO? We partner with the private sector at three levels. The first level is the macro. This is the policy level. We support governments to put in place policies that could enhance partnerships with private sector, but also promote investment. The second area of level of our engagement is the capacity building to support institutions that will allow the implementation of the policies and the strategies of the government. The third one is at the firm level. This is skills development and also ensuring the competitiveness of the enterprises. So these are the three levels where we engage with the government and also with private sector. So these are some of the ideas that I would offer for today's discussion. I will be very glad to take them further in the course of this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. So UNIDO is supporting a number of the foundational elements of green investment and trade and technology. We'll come back to that topic, I think, in the question and answer session a bit later. If I may move on now to Ms. Flois Mukabana from the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. So speaking of technology and digital infrastructure and green technologies, Kenya has a vibrant innovation ecosystem and many entrepreneurial startups. With KEPRPA's role is the government institution mandated to promote and facilitate export products. Could you tell us a little bit more about the programs and initiatives that KEPRPA has in place to support these entrepreneurs and these inventors and new startups to export their products, especially climate-friendly products?
Thank you very much, Madam Tracy. Allow me to begin by just explaining what KEPROBA does. Our main mandate is actually twofold. We have an export promotion mandate as well as a nation branding mandate. And there, our main role is to ensure that we're able to facilitate Kenyan exports to the world globally. As KEPROBA, and maybe before I go to the question, I would also just like to give you an ecosystem about the exports from Kenya. So the three major exports from Kenya are tea, coffee, and horticulture, which form 65% of the exports from the country. And if you note, those exports are agricultural based. That being the case, then they are very vulnerable to issues of climate change in terms of adverse weather conditions, as well as changing ecosystem of the product that comes because of the changes with regard to climate change. So as KEPROBA, one of the things we do to facilitate MSM is actually fourfold. We undertake product and enterprise development activities that are market-led. One of the things we do is to ensure that we have a lot market information from the markets we want to target, and based on that information, we liaise with the enterprises present here to tell them of the consumer tastes and preferences that are there, and capacity build them to be able to have product adaptation programs around the exports they are undertaking. Of note is to note that the current consumers of largely are very environmental conscious. So one of the things we teach them, especially with regard to branding, is the fact that you need to be eco-sensitive about your branding. We also encourage them to be able to take certifications that will be able to assure them and assure their consumers of the level of preparedness in the environmental sustainability programs, not to mention the issue of traceability around the place. The other thing that we do after that is to ensure that we are able to undertake market development activities for these enterprises in the global world. We do that by looking at the areas where we can be able to assist them access markets. Issues of standard come up, and we try and be able to look at the markets from a fourfold perspective. We have traditional markets where already the MSMEs are already have access to that market, and probably what you want to look at them is to see how we can be able to diversify that market or develop it, either through the use of new products into the market, or especially when you look at the fact that most of Kenya's exports are bulk. So we encourage them to do value addition, and we support them towards that, together with all the players in the export value ecosystem, export trade ecosystem. The other thing that we do is also provide information that is necessary for MSMEs to thrive into the market. So we are going to give you our research findings about entry, the markets that you have an interest in. We'll be able to give you market access issues. We'll be able to give you that comes in terms of the consumer preferences and tastes. And we'll be able to give you issues of product adaptation that are in that market, so that you can be able to then package yourself and properly aligned to ensure that then when you get into the market, you have a competitive edge or a fighting chance at being able to push through. But all this, one of the things that we have learned is that with all this, there's still the need for there to be a space for digitalization. Because in that digitization space, it allows us to be able to capture a wider market and a wider audience, even for our MSMEs. So we have rolled out exhibitions virtually. We have undertaken and digitized our training program around the whole component of the export ecosystem, so that you can be able to access it there from wherever you are. And we've also come up with linkages, information that will allow for linkages to take place. We have an online-based exporters directory that allows all these MSMEs to list themselves out in the market as to what they produce, so that anybody who wants to be able to get linkages with these MSMEs in the country has a place to go and find out who and get matches that are relevant to their area of expertise. We've also come up with an e-portal that allows these MSMEs to be able to advertise and set their products out in the global market, And the objective of all this is linkages, which is really the bottom line of what Kenya Export Promotion and Branding does. We're trying to create market linkages for these people. But with the threefold support that we have undertaken, we have empowered them to be able to push their products from a perspective of awareness about the market requirements, awareness as to the advantages they can create for themselves by, for example, having registered for product certification and traceability. So that is the role that KEPROBA plays, and that is how they are facilitated. Bottom line is marketing linkages. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks. I think it's a really important point you made about building the capacity of MSMEs to be able to access that market and to understand consumer preferences. It's becoming widely known now that consumers really do have a strong preference for green products and services, and helping Kenya's MSMEs to market themselves as providers of green products and services is really an important area to build capacity in, as well as establishing those market linkages. Moving on to another element of trade now, Phyllis, on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the investment protocol for AFCFTA aims to create a conducive investment climate for parties to the agreement, and to encourage foreign direct investment as well and promote industrial development. Can you tell us some of the ways that the AFCFTA can promote that?
Thank you very much for the question, and allow me first to welcome everyone who is a guest to Nairobi. As our PS said, we are the cradle of mankind, so feel at home. And for everyone who's contributed before me, PS Mukwana and the rest of the team. So just by introduction, I represent the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, and we work in about 40 countries globally. What we do is we support political leaders to implement their priorities. So we do it at 4 levels. So we start by strategy, where we help to identify priorities, because the reality is you can't do everything, so you need to be able to identify what is most important. And then after that, we support in policy development, so development of relevant policies to be able to implement your strategies. And then the third thing we do is support on delivery, because I know a lot of times governments are very keen to do things for the citizens, but delivery is where the rubber meets the road. So we support governments and political leaders on delivery. And the fourth area is on technology, because we believe technology is at the heart of everything. So thanks a lot for the question, specifically on the investment protocol. And I'll go into a bit of detail about what that entails. But just echoing what the PS said earlier, manufacturing is going to be at the heart not just of Kenya's development, but Africa as a whole. If you look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, it's planning to bring 1.3 billion people across Africa. But more than anything, manufacturing and value addition is going to be at the heart of everything that is going to happen. So the importance of the investment protocol that was passed by the heads of state in February 2023, just this year in Addis Ababa, is that it's going to provide a framework on investment governance that will encourage more sustainable investment. So I'll speak specifically to the fact that, first of all, in Article 2 and 3, the protocol is really looking at how it can drive sustainable investments into the continent by encouraging countries to put in place measures to encourage sustainable investments. It's also dealing with the issue of national treatment and allowing for exceptions if an investment is sustainable and climate friendly. That is actually under Article 12 and 13 of the agreement. And it also provides for state parties the right to regulate so that you're able to have consistent goals and principles of sustainable development. So when investments are coming into the country, countries do have the right to regulate and ensure that those investments are in line with the sustainable and environmental standards. The protocol also provides for minimum standards on the environment, so ensuring that you're not going to lower your standards just to attract investment. So those are some of the factors that countries have to take into place. But more than anything, some of the investments that the protocol is seeking to attract include investments that support actions that mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, investments that support financing of climate mitigation, investments that support a fair and just transition. So I think just zeroing in on the issue of green manufacturing, we have spoken about the fact that a big part of it is around ensuring that there's a lot of resource efficiency in production. So governments, I think, as we look at putting these investment protocols into place, it would ensure putting in place measures to improve resource efficiency. So around energy efficiency, lowering the production, introducing new technologies into manufacturing, and ensuring that the fourth industrial revolution is really driving green manufacturing. The issue of sustainable production and consumption also comes in. So issues around the extended producer responsibility, ensuring that manufacturing is actually adhering to the proper waste management regulations will also become very critical. So some of the things governments can do is encourage investment in green infrastructure. As we know, transport and trade contributes to about 20 to 30%. I think one of the speakers did mention that, of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So ensuring that we're encouraging green investment infrastructure will be critical. Then harmonizing standards so that we have environmental standards that really send a signal that it's important for investors to really produce goods that meet minimum environmental standards. The other important issue is technology. That has been spoken about, but technology will play a critical role across board. And I think I can give an example. There is work we are doing through our Tomorrow Partnership, and the Kenya team of the Tony Blair Institute has been working on a digital land portal, which is implemented in collaboration with KenInvest. And I think this is important for really ensuring that you're able to utilize land fully and address issues around the environment and maximizing the utilization of land, making available resources for industry and scaling up production. So those are some of the examples that I can give about what is happening in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. So the investment protocol, it's actually quite encouraging to hear the way it directly addresses sustainable investment. I know there's been some discourse around trade agreements potentially being incompatible with climate change and climate goals. So it's quite encouraging to hear that. If I may now move on to Ms. Effie Akinyi from Sanovation. So Sanovation is a private MSME providing waste management and sanitation services in Kenya. Could you tell us your views as an MSME? What are some of the current or proposed policies that would really facilitate growth of companies such as your own? And what can government, both national or subnational, be doing to facilitate green startups such as Sanovation?
Thanks so much, Tracy. Actually, Sanovation is a social enterprise. We actually treat human waste and convert that into fuel substitute. So basically prevent water pollution, reduce the number of trees that are cut, reduce carbon offset, and of course improve livelihood through employment provision. We have this slogan meaning poop is money. So as you go to the toilet, all the waste that is generated, we actually convert that to money. That's about a view about our company. So in terms of policies, there has been some good progress. One with the cash policy, with the Water Act 2022 policy. Currently, there is a PPP unit in the national government that actually has recognized the value of working closely with the private operators there. So one of the key things is on enabling environment, especially as a social enterprise. We are actually looking into enabling environment has been really, really key. And some of the things that has enabled us really grow well and rather thrive is on a lot of good initiatives from the government. One, there has been the tax exemption, especially on the renewable energy. But one of the biggest gaps is on the imports there. They're still charging VAT. And so it's still a gap, and you cannot actually recoup that. So just lobbying for zero-rated when we talk about exemption of these non-renewable products. Think about inputs as well. And of course, things to do with encouraging demand for sustainable fuel, especially by the manufacturers, if we can have policies around there to encourage or create demand, so that the products that actually are being produced by the private operators, those can actually create market for them. Another key thing, especially from the government, sanitation, we are in the sanitation space. Sanitation actually is a public good, and we'll also encourage the government actually to invest more, just really to trigger the market. And for a start, the government could, for instance, spend $2.5 per capita for provision of sanitation services. Some reports by WashFin was released sometime 2 years ago that currently the amount going into sanitation is around 0.06% of GDP. And it should be close to 0.5% of the GDP to actually achieve the Ngor commitments. So basically, we really need the sector to the sector to be incentivized to encourage more private sector involvement. And just in relation to this, a lot of funding or investments, most of them are really short-term, 0 to 5 years. So just thinking about what does that mean to mature the market beyond the 5 years. So when thinking about the investment, let's think about the sustainability part of it. And then my last part will be on government procurement. So we've seen a lot of programs that come in place are, in terms of operational sustainability, the procurement mostly is maybe design, build, as opposed to design, build, operate, and maintain, whereby one partner comes, does their part, the other partners does their part. So thinking about the entire operational sustainability when structuring these projects would really, really ensure that private sectors are incentivized to run these projects right to operational sustainability of RIM. A good example is most of the wastewater treatment facilities in Mexico, or actually over 90% of them are currently not operational. Why? Because we haven't thought about the operational sustainability of it. So when thinking about procurement, let's think about design, build, operate, and maintain to really incentivize the private sector, the micro, medium enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think you've highlighted how important a conducive government, a relationship with government and supportive environment from the government, especially helping to ensure that there's long-term sustainability, long-term opportunities for companies and social enterprises in this space. So let me now move on to Mr. Walid Harab Al-Falahi from the UAE Trade Center. So the UAE Trade Center aims to assist in promoting and developing cross-border trade between the UAE and African countries. Could you share your perspective on the key sectoral opportunities for investment as an outside investor into Africa?
This one is working. This one. See, for us, we've been here for 25 years, all over Africa. We're involved in different type of projects. We do trade finance, and trade finance is a very unique industry because what we saw, there is no lack of funding. It's just it's increase of bureaucracy. I'll give you an example. We brought $30 million for trade finance for SME. And we were shocked. We brought it at a range of 4% from UAE government. So usually what we do is we put a bank to manage the funding. We were shocked that the bank want to take more than the lender. They're saying we do 6 to 4. Then by the time we started calculating, poor SME in Kenya, they go to 18 to 20%. So it's like, we realize that the problem is not the money. The problem, banks also are not helping, even though what they do is they do KYC. You know, basically that's what they're doing. So trade finance is one area that we do, and we're still committed to going into that field in a big way, because we see an opportunity, we see an element that adds value also to our business. Another element that we do, which I think we are becoming time by time strong at, is cross-border trade. In my opinion, the future, whoever can hedge logistics can make it big. Luckily for us, the Amazon of the world and the Alibaba are not strong in cross-border trade. People say, what the heck this guy is talking about? Yes. What we discovered in Africa, B2B and B2C is not strong. What is strong is trade platforms. So what we did, we started putting trade finance to support all these merchants, even small merchants. We don't want to touch the big boys. The big boys, we leave them to the big boys. But we saw an opportunity for trade finance, for e-commerce. And then the third part, what we do is energy and solar. And what we discovered is, from our experience, we have 100 megawatt solar in Ghana, for example. And we are willing to start, we moved in the project. Then we reached a stage where we said to the government, without naming the government, we need an offtake. You need to give us, something that you guarantee what we are producing. They said it's only $100 million. I said, yeah, but $100 million, you don't see it in the street. You have to raise it. The challenge that we have, every country, and I'm talking about a lot of countries in Africa, they have lack of energy, but at the same time, they don't want to give people guarantee of buying the electricity. There is so many people want to invest in Africa in energy. I'm one of them, these people who've gone through this curve. We are willing to bring the money, but guarantee that whatever we produce, you'll buy. Simple, huh? Nobody wants to do it. And you see ministers of countries, big countries, they shiver. I know, I hope there is no World Bank, IFC here. I'm serious, huh? I'm talking about major country in Africa. And the guy is shivering. He's saying, no, World Bank will not allow us. Who's World Bank? There is money in Africa. We reached a time where we need an African energy funds. We've been having discussion with every Exim Bank, and we see positive. We had a discussion with Africa Development Bank. We have good vibe. It just need little bit of leadership to push through, because you guys, you don't need outside money. There is enough money in the continent to grow continent needs of energy, agriculture, you name it. This is one of the countries, by the way, other countries, without going political, so I hope, next week I'm going to the US, so I don't want to be in blacklist. This is a country, this is one of the few countries that can put mining toward currency. No other country can do it. I'm talking big boys, they cannot do what you do. So we need to be serious, guys. Second, last thing, because I think I'm going a little bit overboard. You know? I spent 25 years in FDI. I know FDI probably better than a lot of people. I founded project in Dubai to attract investment. What shocked me the most, I went to so many countries and I throw the word, do you have an investment map? And they're like, no, what does investment map mean? Investor comes to your country. He wants to know the small basic. By the way, any sustainability study from any country in Africa, we don't care about it. We take it and we throw it because we redo it. But a lot of the investors want to know the sectors, want to know the viability. And guys, and PS, this doesn't exist. I mean, Kenya started trying to do it, and we had very positive, and KIA is trying to go that route, which is, I applaud for it. But the majority of African countries have not done their preparation. When the investor comes, they have ready product for them to look at. I'm not saying visibility study, case study for people to understand the sectors that you want, the viability. You know, in one country, the whole government is pushing us to go to that region. And after we discussed and we studied and we spent, we realized that that region is the worst region in the country for solar. So that's my view, but I mean, I would leave it to my other colleagues to give their view.
Thank you for those remarks. I think that's a really unique perspective, maybe one we don't hear so much of in some of these forums. And I think you've highlighted that the problem is not the availability of money. The money is there. It just needs to be able to get to the right places, and it needs the information, and it needs the support, and it needs a few key gaps addressed in order to facilitate that. We're running quite short on time, but I would like to allow the PS, Dr. Makwana, to make any closing remarks you might want to comment or respond to Mr. Walid's remarks.
Okay, thank you so much, and I think Mr. Walid has made it very, very practical. I guess the message that we take away from what he's saying is as we organize ourselves, as we join the global big brothers to negotiate and navigate this big potential and big promise that Africa holds, that it's not going to be a highway for everyone. I think that what Mr. Walid is saying is that we need different skills, we need tact, we need plans, we need investment maps, that it's not as straightforward as it looks. And so there are many players. As you venture out of your village into the global arena to look for solutions to power Africa, to bring investments to Africa, that we need clear roadmaps and we need capacity within our institutions to really do proper feasibility studies, to advise those who want to come, to keep an eye on the policies that are encouraging and even discouraging some of these investments. So I see that this is a really, and I think this is where Phyllis came in, the issue of how do we work to align the manifestos of government with policy and the delivery of those, and how do we get institutions that are functional, that are able to give us the kind of workmanship that we are looking for, that are able to deliver. I am aware that sometimes investors have to go around in circles for a very long time to close a deal. How do we close deals? How do we close deals as quickly as possible? How do we deal with competing interests? Because sometimes investment means that you have 2-3 different people trying to put a product in your face, and sometimes you get confused on which one is more suitable, which one is more affordable. So I get that's what he's trying to say. In conclusion, I think what I would like to say is that Africa has been missing in action. If we look at our level of manufacturing, in spite of the fact that we are the largest producers of raw materials. So one of the things that we are saying, yes, it's not going to be easy, but we are ready to engage. And Africa is ready for investment because I just want to summarize that looking at what has been going on globally, especially after post-COVID, with the logistics going up, the cost of freight going up, it makes sense to invest in Africa so that you're not transporting raw materials from here to China to bring them back as final products, because then you're paying double transport. So the high cost that is coming up is really, we have already talked about raw materials, the issues of cobalt, minerals that we have that can be lithium and others, and that is a good attraction. The other issue that we have talked about is the issue of the young population and a growing middle class. If you look at Kenya here, I know that before COVID, the word tourist referred to somebody who was white and foreign. But today, post-COVID, if you go to Mombasa today, our hotels are full, and they are full with local people. So we have redefined this word. So there is a growing middle class that is able to consume some of the products that we'll be producing. But we're also saying that these young people that are coming out in terms of skills, Africa gives the highest potential in terms of young people that can be able to work in some of these places. The other issue, and I think the President talked about this, is the issue of Africa has what people look at as challenges. But challenges are the opportunities that are calling for us to invest. When we say there's no road, when we say there's no health, when we say there is no water, when we say there is no energy, it's actually not a problem. It's an opportunity waiting for you to tap into. And I think that what the President has said is that Africa has moved out of being a crybaby. We are looking for solutions. And so the challenges that Africa has are the opportunities that really should bring investments in the future. Because for many countries, you can see that when we are discussing about energy, in other continents, we are discussing about how do we make it more green. Everybody has electricity, but how do we make it green? If you're talking about manufacturing, yes, we have the products that we need, but how do we make that process green? But in Africa, it's a different conversation. The conversation is that we have a challenge, we don't have these products, and therefore we have an opportunity for us to invest. And so because of the many challenges that we have, it also means that we have many opportunities for you to tap into. And so when I look at the conversation, the AfTA, when I look at what Kenya is doing, we just completed the Kenya-EU, for example, partnership agreement. Kenya, a small country, has completed a trade agreement with the 27 countries in Europe. Who is going to supply those products? That's why we need investment. We are at the tail end of a Kenya agreement, STIP. Again, once the market opens, duty-free, quota-free for 25 years, who is going to supply? And so we see that we are opening up opportunities, not just here because it makes sense, but also because of our global partnerships. We are able to give you, to leverage, to give you advantage, to give you not just the Kenyan market, but also to give you the African market and to give you the markets that we are negotiating with other partners, including what I've mentioned in the EU, what I've mentioned within the US, and so on. So mine is really to thank you, to encourage you that Africa is ready for investment, and we welcome all of you. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to thank the whole panel for your remarks. I think what the key message I've taken away among many is let's focus on the opportunities. And I think that's what this dialogue is about. And I hope that there'll be more discussions on that throughout the course of the afternoon. I'd like to now, as the panel takes their seats, I'd like to invite Mr. John Tonui, the CEO and Postmaster General for the Postal Corporation of Kenya, and I'd like to hear your views on green investment opportunities in Kenya, please. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Yes, listening to the presenters today, there is no doubt in our mind that the future of our business is green. The postal sector under the Universal Postal Union has a global reach for the public and private sector in 192 countries in the world. However, I'm going to talk about an opportunity in climate responsive logistics with the case of Kenya. Of course, the split of the Postal Corporation of Kenya under the Kenya Post and Telecommunication Corporation in 1998 offered an opportunity to relook at our strategy to ensure that the right environment for innovation and growth in the telecommunication sector. The postal sector remains untapped and is facing the perfect storm where sustaining tradition through written communication and embracing technology and innovation is very critical. Posta is a logistics service provider and ensures communication and articles reach citizens across the country. This is a universal service, also a service that should remain relevant, reliable, and affordable to the consumer. Then the question comes, why e-mobility is relevant in Kenya today, and especially to the Postal Corporation of Kenya. Posta spends 10% of its annual budget on motor vehicle maintenance and petroleum products. In an environment where the global logistics market is moving into the digital space, going paperless and going electric, the opportunity is ripe at the Postal Corporation of Kenya. We have three areas that we need to look at, even as we invite investors into our system, is we have an asset base of 11.5 billion Kenya shillings, while the return on this investment is 1.8%, as opposed to 8% to 12% from our income. We are experiencing a 20% decline in post-letter revenue, yet it's still remaining a top income earner for the corporation. For sustainable economic prosperity, the postal sector needs a new balance. We have the ambition to generate to the Kenyan economy 100,000 new jobs in the logistics and postal sector. It is critical that we put in place a model that creates new and climate-responsive jobs. Then the question again comes, why Posta for e-mobility investment? Of course, looking at the Postal Corporation of Kenya as it is today, we have 623 sites and 192 countries that we are members together at the global stage. Under the Universal Postal Union, of course, communication is enshrined in the 1948 Charter under the UN Convention. Of course, the most critical issue that we have at the post office is a dedicated workforce, very competent, reliable, because logistics is our business. We have 100 post offices in high traffic areas that will offer free Wi-Fi under the government Wi-Fi initiative targeting MSMEs. On a daily basis, we process 3,500 to 5,000 parcels of under 2 kgs. This is the average threshold for e-commerce commodities. On our assets, the corporation has assets valued at 11.5 billion, which is US dollars 6.8, and very keen to push the limits so that we transform our operations and value proposition in the Kenyan logistics landscape. We maintain a lean fleet of 260 and already supplement any additional logistics needs with third-party operators. Vibrant market. The Kenyan digital economy makes 7.7% contribution to the Kenyan GDP, which is equivalent to 410 billion US dollars. More than 7 million of the 55 million Kenyans population is actively buying and selling online. These numbers start to shift positively with the adult population at 53%, starting to consume digital space and catalyst for digital trade and commerce. Kenya has 1.2 billion registered motorcycles riders ready to expand and serve the growing logistics industry. Ladies and gentlemen, investing in climate responsive logistics today will enable a government commercial agency such as Posta position itself for a successful future. Last but not least, the investment opportunity. Every post office is located in a place where citizens of all walks of life can receive a postal service. Sitting at where you are, even the village that you come from, the only government institution that is available is the post office. And that is the reason why we are offering these assets to any investor that is willing to invest. To reach such a transformation at a national and global impact level, an investment estimate of US dollars 34 million, which is equivalent to 5 billion Kenyan shillings, is needed. This investment will go into both capital and operational expenditure for the following key areas, only three. Create a one-stop shop for e-mobility owners and players across the country by converting postal land and buildings and assets. Put in place a supporting infrastructure for e-mobility. This is both buildings and relevant ICT infrastructure. Create the right shift to an environmentally conscious society. This requires a consistent stakeholder engagement, branding and communication, employee upskilling, investing innovation, research and development, and shaping a postal operator that is responsive to the dynamic market needs in the logistics industry. In conclusion, as we deliberate in this forum that is bringing together various stakeholders, including trade ministers across the continent, the opportunity to invest in e-mobility for the public and private sector is ripe in Kenya, and at the post office to be particular. So the Postal Corporation of Kenya are among the largest holders of physical and land assets that can be tapped for e-mobility delivery. Thank you.
Thank you to the Postmaster General, and of course recognizing my co-moderator, Tracy Lane. If I can call her up on stage, and the Postmaster General, you can please join the panel up on stage for a group picture, and another final round of applause to the eminent panel, marking the end of our first panelists. So I'm going to ask you to just stand and then take a group picture, also just to appreciate the online audience that is joining us as well and following these proceedings live. That marks the end of our Green Investments and Technology panel, ably led by Madam Tracy Lane from KPMG, and of course concluded by the Postmaster General, Mr. Tunui, as well. Thank you so much. And they will now take their seats as I now invite up on stage Mr. Patingere, who's going to lead the panel. The next panel is going to be on the climate finance mechanisms. I should mention that we have translation services available as well. I'm told the hashtag we're running for this is the Africa Trade Dialogue. Hashtag Africa Trade Dialogue as well. I mentioned that we have an online audience who've joined us today. Hence, you'll agree why I'd want to hasten us towards the beat to conclude on time as well, so that we don't as well keep them waiting. So at this point in time, Patrick will introduce his panelists, and after which we'll progress, and the context setting will be done by Madam Janice Kotut. Over to you.
Good afternoon. In the spirit of saving time and being in the climate agenda, allow me to be environmental. She's the Senior Advisor on Climate Adaptation and Resilience at the Africa Climate Foundation. The next lady to come up on stage is Ms. Mbithe Mwema, the Chief Business Officer at the Nairobi Stock Exchange. And the gentleman will be led by Mr. Oscar Njuguna, the CEO, Nairobi International Finance Center. It's actually Financial Center. Followed by Mr. Edmund Bala Bobo, the Head of ESG Risk Management at Afrexim Bank. And last but not least, Mr. Becky Bembe, the Economic Advisor at UNDP. Ladies and gentlemen, as I introduce Janice to set the context on climate finance mechanisms, allow me to quote His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya today while opening the ministerial conference at the summit. We are not here to catalog the grievances and list problems. We are here to scrutinize ideas, assess perspectives, and unlock solutions. So Janice, please break down for us climate finance mechanisms.
With pleasure. Thanks, Patrick. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is I'm a partner at KPMG. KPMG has 29 offices across Africa. We work on providing advice to public, private sector clients, and in my particular role, I'll be looking at infrastructure finance. But this afternoon, it's my great pleasure and privilege to be here to talk a little bit about climate finance. And I thought to do so, maybe it made sense to just go back to basics a little bit and start from the beginning, right? So I think all of us have noticed the change in weather patterns, and that's essentially what we mean by climate change. And it's brought about by human action, and if we don't do anything, the temperature increase will go above 1.5 degrees, and if it does, then that's catastrophic. So we have something that we can do about this. We can reduce our emissions, and that's what people call mitigation, and that's by going electric or by using more renewable energy. Or we can also build resilience, right? Prepare ourselves for the new world. And this just means we need to change the way we live, we work, the way we travel. And that needs funding. And that funding is essentially what we call climate finance. And I think it was mentioned in an earlier panel, the developed countries set aside about $100 billion of climate finance to try and support developing countries as they transition to this new way of living, these new business models. We've talked about electric motorbikes a lot in Kenya, but that all requires funding, right? So there's a lot of climate funding out there that's concessional, because everybody recognizes that climate change isn't a problem, it's Africa problem, it's a global challenge that we all have to address by changing the way we live, we work, and travel. And so talked about mitigation and adaptation. The funding for that is essentially climate finance. How do we unlock it? Because ultimately, I think, as has been said in earlier panels, there's a lot of money out there, but accessing it is the problem. We hear the processes are long, they're complex, they're complicated. And so today's panel is really going to try and look at some opportunities and mechanisms of how you unlock this climate funding, but there are a lot of them out there, and it's a very long conversation, and we don't have enough time. But we will talk about grants, we'll talk about green bonds, we'll talk about carbon credits, and we'll even talk about ESG and sustainable lending. So without much further ado, Patrick, I'll hand over back to you in the interest of time.
Thank you, Janice. I think we have a small idea of what climate finance mechanism is. I was having a conversation with Phyllis, and I think I asked whether climate finance mechanism is saving money in the cloud like what we have with tech. But thank you for that. I will go straight to Eva. The Africa Climate Foundation, the first African-led climate change regranting organization. You were founded to provide a mechanism through which philanthropies can contribute to Africa's efforts to address climate change. As an African-led and African-based foundation, AFC committed to supporting African solutions to the climate change challenges facing the continent. So my question to AFC is, why grants? What do these grants cover? And how are they accessed and by who?
Let's try again. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this dialogue, and also
I think our mics are not environmentally friendly. Sound.
Yeah, here. Is this one better? No? Yes? Yes, very keen to hear what others in the panel and in the room have to contribute to the dialogue, and very thankful to be able to visit this beautiful country. So on your question about the African Climate Foundation, we use grants and we follow the regranting model because it allows us to identify strong partnerships. And when it comes to developing the climate finance market on the continent, it requires multiple actors coming together, right? It's part of it is appealing and identifying the appropriate investors and funders to mobilize the capital. Part of it is having the enabling regulatory framework and supporting policymakers in that, which is not a trivial task and requires a lot of research and cost-benefit analysis and quite complex analysis. It also requires a lot of awareness across different industries. It requires clients and investors to ask for a change in how businesses do their functions, how their strategy takes into account climate change. So our grant model allows us to create an ecosystem of these kind of partnerships so that over the longer term they can sustain themselves and work really with all type of actors. Now, in terms of the type of grants that we give, some relate to research that is based on evidence or climate scenario analysis, just robust research that can inform policymakers and also help us identify what are the funding priorities in different areas. Other type of grants we give is more around technical support and capacity building on the continent, supporting governments directly in developing further how to go about just transitions, how to develop further their adaptation plans, and linking them to the right kind of technical expertise that can help them make informed decisions. And finally, we also look for initiatives and platforms that can have a multiplier effect. And one example of that is our quite early on involvement in the Just Energy Transition (GEP) in South Africa. It is an initiative that has had a lot of benefits, and we've learned a lot. We've also learned a lot of things to do better and to explore further. But it is an example of how bringing together different actors, thinking at a larger scale about funding can help achieve the scale that is needed for both, well, for mitigation, but also for adaptation, which I'm personally passionate about. I want to talk a little bit more about the role of grants and philanthropies more broadly beyond us. One of the challenges that a lot of African countries face is that the most vulnerable often have also other underlying vulnerabilities. So climate resilience is needed to be looked at alongside economic resilience and how to improve both. And that is where the challenge of mobilizing funding is particularly strong, because often countries that suffer a lot of climate shocks don't necessarily have the fiscal space or don't have the financial markets developed sufficiently to help them effectively mobilize the scale of funding needed. So this is where philanthropies can play a bigger role. And I do invite everyone to reflect on how particularly philanthropic capital can help de-risk some of the projects and help really showcase the investment opportunity and hopefully scale also more funding through the private sector to achieve the ambition that is needed. And that is particularly a challenge, I would say, on the adaptation side. I've been witnessing the development of the market, the climate finance market on the continent for a few years now. And there's been a lot of fantastic initiatives and efforts, but a lot of the progress achieved so far has also focused on mitigation, which is very needed. But climate change is happening now, and I don't need to tell you that. And for many countries, the real challenge will be how do we help those communities adapt to the new realities, as well as take advantage of the new opportunities. It's not all negative news, but it does require a strategic thinking around adaptation and the role of financing mechanisms to support particular adaptation projects. So that's where I'm going to leave my remark, as I'm keen to hear what others think as well.
Thank you, Eva. I was just about to remind us that the partners have told me they have not paid for dinner. So my next question goes to Mr. Becky. The Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by the UN in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. These goals aim to enhance North-South and South-South cooperation by supporting national plans to achieve all the targets. Promoting international trade and helping developing countries increase their exports is all part of achieving universal rules based on an equitable trading system that is fair and open and benefits all. My question, Mr. Becky, how can we make markets work for the SDGs? And could you talk about SDG 13 that mentions the environment and the climate?
Thank you very much, Program Director and the speakers ahead of me. Yes, this is a big topic indeed. Maybe let me preface my intervention by saying recently the UNSG noted that out of about 69 poor countries, only about 37 of them are at risk of debt distress. I think that's one figure I would like to share. And out of the poorest countries, about 175 million people are at risk of poverty or are living below poverty. So that's the paradox. We have the need, we don't have the means, as it were. And then the other point I wanted to sort of underscore is the fact that, you know, sub-Saharan Africa is contending with a financing gap of almost or up to 77% of the adaptation program. Let me say climate finance, of which most of it is adaptation. So that's the sort of paradox we find ourselves in as Africa and as developing countries. But how do we then move on to create the markets we need? Number one, and I'll just mention 3 points. I see you are looking at me. So firstly, it's just setting up systems, systems that will speak to the problem at site. So what we are advocating for is that to unlock additional funding, we need integrated sort of financing systems. Financing systems or financing strategies that speak to plans. I think that's one point. And then the second point is that we also need financing, strategies that will cut across partners, that will be alive to the different partners, whether it's private, whether it's public. So that's the other level of integration. And the third level of integration is obviously the new sources of financing that are coming through. May it be philanthropy, may it be your remittances. How do we best tap onto that? So number one, integrated systems that will allow us to unlock additional funding. Number two, I think we need to be intentional about SDG financing, especially for the private sector. If we just stay on the rhetoric to say we need financing for SDGs without going further to creating the investor maps that Walid was speaking to, then we risk at remaining at the rhetoric and not moving sort of a step further and unlocking the funding that we need. And then number three, I think the rhetoric has got a risk of obtaining both of the public and then private. So moving from intention to actual showing, to showing the actual impact on the ground. How do we move? How do we do that? We need to be deliberate in terms of aligning or assigning all investments to specific SDGs. Until we do that, I think our story about investing for SDGs will continue to be sort of a pipe dream. So how do we move from tagging, public spending to specific SDGs? How do we move from, articulating a private intention of financing a specific SDG into those investments that we need? So I think those will be sort of the 3 points I will put on the table in terms of what and how. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Climate change also brings with it new opportunities, new business models, but also opportunities. Green bonds. The NSE launched green bonds market, becoming one of the few exchanges with a legal framework for green bonds. Mbithe, how does this help facilitate the mobilization of domestic and international capital for green finance? And also, carbon credits have gained momentum, and ACMI have launched the roadmap. NSE has also put in place initiatives on matters carbon credits. And we could hear about this briefly. And how does this support and enhance sustainability in Africa? And what is your role as the stock exchange?
Thank you so much for those questions. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a green conversation. We didn't put on green, except for Oscar. So I've been looking around and I'm like, oh, wow. We just came in blue and other colors. But first and foremost, thank you to CanInvest and METI for bringing this conversation together and bringing us together. And I'm also keen to hear the deliberations that are coming through. Now, as the NSE and the capital markets, we did come up with a green bond framework, and we're actually proud to say that we actually will have one issuance, which came in from ACAN, that was looking for 5.7 billion shillings for their greenhouse projects. Probably you've seen some of their projects, Square to Housing, student housing. They've been able to do that. And that went very well, and it just showed us that as a market, we actually have the capability. Second, we also have the institutional framework for issuance of green bonds. So when you're talking about lack of products, actually that's not the challenge. We already have been able to demonstrate that it's there. Honorable Peter, the challenge has actually been getting issuers to align to that standard. When it comes to green bonds and the category of investments in the capital markets, green bonds are at the very top when it comes to your investor readiness, your transparency, and how you need to account for use of proceeds, getting an independent verifier. Every single year, someone needs to look at your products to actually say this still qualify for a green label. Should you lose that, you can actually lose your green label status, and the Capital Markets Authority can then ask you to actually delist your product, which means you have to give investors back their money. So that said, that has actually been very pivotal for just demonstrating that we have a market that can do that. Now, the challenge has actually been getting issuers to come in because the standard is well up there. But I'd just like to demonstrate 3 things that ACON did. ACON, on its information memorandum, when it came to the markets, it said 3 things. It said we shall use 20% less water than traditional housing units. We shall use 20% less energy than our standard competitors. And what they did is then they aligned to IFC Edge. So the discussion when we have with potential issuers, they say it's very expensive, it's undoable. But you think about 20% less energy means if you actually use solar or you have mechanisms that actually allow your lights to go off, you've already achieved that. We've been working with FSD Kenya, have gone to 10 counties, have spoken to the county governments in these places, have talked to the private sector, spending a maximum of 4 days, sometimes even 5 in these counties. This challenge has been constant in all of these areas. There's a need for financing for water, there's a need for financing for electricity, there's a need for financing for infrastructure. But when we work with a verifier, the challenge is your projects do not qualify to be green, and some work needs to be done for them to qualify to be green, for them to actually come into the market and seek financing. Some of them, the interventions that come through these conversations are as follows. First, when it comes to green bonds, we've taken some time to set the climate and the context in defining the green bonds. I think at a national level, there is an opportunity set for either the universities or the technical institutions to start bringing programs that actually create that awareness for green bonds. We have been doing it together with the Capital Markets Authority. More needs to be done. But secondly, there's also an opportunity for the issuance of a sovereign bond by the government, because we are in a space where the counties need to be able to finance green opportunities, but then there's a challenge of how can they finance it? How can their financials actually support this? There has been an ongoing conversation, and I think some of the people who have been leading that conversation are seated in this room today. Thirdly, again, if I go to a national level, there is the agenda for manufacturing, the agenda for affordable housing, the agenda for infrastructure. I think if we all take into consideration what is a green bond and decide to actually adopt 1, 2, or 3 principles of green bonds and ensure that any projects that we're doing today as Kenya are actually aligned to green bond principles in one way or the other, then that ensures that as we're running these projects, we're slowly getting the issuers or developers of the projects to appreciate what green bonds entail, and conversely, then having partnerships with ACI and other partners to say, even though they're not at 100%, can we actually have a phased approach to deploying capital to these projects as long as they're meeting and they're demonstrating, and you have a verification process on an annual basis. Now to the final point of carbon credits, because I can see you giving me the eye.
The green eye.
The green eye, fantastic, I hear you. So on carbon credits, a lot has been happening. We did get into agreements last year and have been exploring how we can actually set up the carbon credit market. We've now taken a Pan-African approach where we're working with our exchanges that are in Africa to see how can we actually do this together so that we can provide a platform for trading of these opportunities, not just only in Kenya, but how can we partner. That conversation is ongoing, so we might not be able to talk much about it today, but we will be able to demonstrate that. But it's just to give you the assurance that we have the institutional framework, the institutional capacity, have been actively thinking and working on this. We actually have a space where our board has been trained by a foreign university. Senior managers have been trained by foreign universities. So in terms of the knowledge and appreciation, it is there. It's now coming to the point of saying, how do we align to the current Climate Act and ensure that whatever is happening here can be the trading can be facilitated either locally or globally. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Mbithe. Ladies and gentlemen, Nairobi International Finance Center is a new business environment established a year ago to make it easier and more attractive to invest and conduct financial services and related activities in Kenya. The NIC framework provides a more predictable, efficient, and globally competitive environment by providing incentives and benefits to firms in line with other successful financial centers. Bwana Oscar, how are you going to achieve this goal to attract investment? And what are you doing to attract more climate finance? And what will the future of NIFC look like?
Thank you, Patrick. So just getting straight into it, I think it's fair to say that what we've heard today is clear that finance flows where the opportunities are. It flows where the risks are lower, and it flows where I think that the regulatory environment is more conducive. And so with the NIFC, we are doing what other financial centers have been doing for a long time, looking at creating a more predictable and efficient regulatory environment, but also looking at the types of incentives that we can put in place to encourage more finance, and in particular, climate finance. So some of the things that we've already put in terms of the legislation, we've got a tax incentive that seeks to bring in more private equity, venture capital into the country and into the region. And so there's some predictability around the capital gains tax that investors will pay when they exit those investments. So we've looked at that being a key issue that was raised by a number of stakeholders, which with regard to the unpredictability of the tax framework. Another area that we've looked at, which was mentioned by Mbithe, is around carbon trading, because it's clear that revenues from carbon are a key part of projects that are clean and green. And so therefore the development of the carbon market is going to be key. And one area that is still growing is the area of exchanges and emissions trading systems that bring about more transparency in carbon pricing and in the selling process. So we're working with the NSC and others to see how we can introduce more efficiencies there, but we have a specific tax incentive within the Kenyan legislation around setting up an emissions trading system within the NIFC. On the operational side, there are a number of things that we're trying to address with several partners. So for example, for investors coming in, and particularly recently, one of the areas that they look at, obviously, that they need to have efficiency around is work permits and the sort of bureaucracy around setting up. And so we're working closely with the Department of Immigration, the Directorate of Immigration, with KenInvest, MITI, to really see what we can do to improve those efficiencies and the turnaround time for issuances of things like work permits. So we're looking at some of the softer issues there. And more generally, we've got strategic engagements with the UK, with several governments around areas of innovation. So we're supporting some of the fintechs within the fintech ecosystem to access funds internationally. And one area that we're looking at now, together with the UNDP and with the United Nations Financial Centers for Sustainability, is a pipeline builder project or platform where we can help to match and to bring to the fore a number of bankable projects, green and clean projects, and match those with the finance that is looking for those sorts of bankable projects. And so if we can create, through this pipeline builder, a platform to match the two, then I think we'll see a bit more traction in some of the projects that we'd like to see, because it's a complex area to put together investable projects. And so therefore, there's technical assistance and support that's needed to help those projects. So there's some of the things that we're looking at doing. Those are some of the initiatives. I think that there's been a lot of interest in the NIFC and in the region generally, and using gateways such as the center. And we have a growing network of collaboration across the continent ensuring that we work together with other stakeholders, many of who are here, we can create this improved environment and then hopefully address some of the issues that have been raised by the gentleman from the UAE Trade Center and others, which are obviously very key and need to be looked at. So that's where we're focusing, and I think the future is relatively bright.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. The president of Afrexim Bank met with His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and intimated at supporting the climate agenda in Kenya. Are there specific initiatives that the bank would be looking at to support, and especially those that are identified as flagship projects and are aligned to Agenda 63 on the environment? How is your bank adapting its portfolios and approach to underwriting in line with ESG principles?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and I want to thank the organizers of this event for inviting Afrexim Bank to be part of this event. I'll start by saying that as a continental institution, Afrexim Bank, our interventions are tailored to address two issues. One of them is to support the continent in addressing the risk that comes with climate change. And secondly, is to provide the right environment and catalyze opportunities that are inherent in climate change. So I'll start by speaking more around some of the interventions we've had, harping on the commitments that was made by our president while he visited this country some months ago. As part of the flagship intervention, the bank has earmarked an $800 million climate adaptation facility for Kenya. The facility is the pilot of a broader climate adaptation facility for Africa. And the structure of the facility is such that it's a multi-instrument facility comprising direct loans, concessional lending, equity where necessary, where we find bankable projects, and project preparation facility, grants, and other instruments that we deem quite critical to address the issues of climate change. One of the other interventions we are looking at is to address existential challenges that relates to access to climate finance in the continent and in Kenya. Most of our speakers previously, my co-panelists, have actually highlighted some of the challenges we have and even painted a picture of the quantum of financial investments that are required to address the issues of climate change in the continent. We need to know that clearly, for example, the continent is said to require close to $2.8 trillion to meet and support its implementation of its NDC commitments when it comes to climate change. Practically, one of the most potent instruments that we have is an instrument that is designed to address and de-risk project risk when it comes to climate adaptation projects in the continent. One of the things we've seen as an institution that has interventions across the continent is the fact that there are quite a lot of projects, there are quite a lot of opportunities, but most of these projects are not executed, or you don't even get partners to come to play in terms of supporting those projects because of existential issues around transaction structure, profitability, as it were, and even basic issues such as technical due diligence that are required to bring the projects to a level where you can get other partners and even the private sector to come to play. So to this end, the bank has put together the project preparation facility. The project preparation facility is designed to support climate-related projects and other types of projects to reach bankability, de-risk projects, and ensure that in terms of technical readiness, that due diligence and other studies that needs to happen for some of these projects to come to play are addressed. The project is structured, the intervention is structured such that for every project, you can get a maximum of $2 million intervention, and the bank can fund close to 70% of the technical due diligence cost and or early study requirements, study costs for those projects to get to the market. Aside that, given the success of this project, I'll mention that this project, this instrument was rolled out first in 2009. And so far, in terms of interventions, we've been able to support projects over $6 billion in the continent. We looked at the success of this instrument, and one of the things that came to bear was that there was a need to strengthen our capacity to be able to support the continent through this window. In this regard, this year, we started a structure, we restructured the facility. It's now a joint project preparation facility to the extent that we can get other financing partners to come to play to help address the issues around bankability of project, particularly early stage risk issues as far as project delivery is concerned. The other thing I would like to mention is that we are also financing initiatives that support and address issues of access to climate finance. One of the things we've seen is that over the years, if you look at the flow of climate finance to the continent, is largely composed of concessional international development assistance to the continent. From a country perspective, you find direct budgetary allocations to projects or initiatives that has to do with climate. For Afreximbank, one of the things we are pushing forward is this whole idea of a new financing architecture. Let's begin to move away from the conventional approach to providing finance to for climate purposes to non-conventional approaches. For the non-conventional approaches, we are beginning to see, let's come up with a multi-party structure to the extent that you begin to get much more participation of private sector in projects. We provide technical assistance to countries, to private sector, to ensure that they are able to structure transactions. Even from on our own side, in developing new transactions and projects, we are taking our time to look at issues around the tenure of facilities, climate-type facilities. Typically, if you look at most of the projects that are qualified as climate compliance, are essentially projects that have a tenure of over 10 years in average. So from an Afreximbank perspective, we are looking at how do we support the continent to ensure that issues of deal structuring, when it comes to climate finance interventions, we also address them. Then lastly, somebody mentioned earlier the issue of the AFCFTA. Afreximbank is the sole financial institution, or DFI in Africa, that is playing the lead in terms of providing finance for the implementation of the AFCFTA. We've made a grant of $10 million to the AFCFTA to support the implementation. We've also provided a $1 billion facility to operationalize the AFCFTA. From a climate perspective, these interventions are aimed to address one single fact: localization of trade value chains in Africa. That we see that if Africa combines these multiple opportunities in terms of instruments of intervention, we're able to address systemic issues around climate finance. We're also collaborating on the carbon credit initiative, African Carbon Market Initiative, and other initiatives to drive climate finance and also improve the continent's access to climate finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Babo. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our panel, but I will ask Janice on behalf of the panel to give a parting shot. I will give her exactly 10 seconds. Please make me look nice. All the PSs are here. And I would like to challenge us in this climate agenda. As you make your business deals, commemorate it with planting a tree. Your promotional material, use recycled material so that we can play our part in preserving this environment. We've been told by 2050 the glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya will have all melted away. And half of our planet gets water from melted glaciers. So if they dry by 2050, all of us will be there, but some of our grandkids may not enjoy the environment that we have right now. So Janice, please.
Yeah, no pressure, 10 seconds. Climate change brings with its risks but also opportunities, and I think that our panelists today have highlighted some of the mechanisms to access that funding that address that paradox that was mentioned. All the projects are there, the funding is there, we just need the mechanisms to access the funding. Thank you.
Vincent tells me as we take our photo, there's something he's bringing for the panelists. That means you did a good job. Please clap for them. So, Cliff, I think we're going to go into the photo session of this panel. Then we move to the next session. Thank you for being quite an attentive audience. Thanks.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That marks the end of our climate finance mechanisms panel. And yeah, I think Patrick is ably distributing the gifts to make sure they make it for the photo session. So please, as they stand and take one final photo, then that marks the end of our second panel for this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause, please, as they take their seats. Thank you very much, Patrick, ably moderated as well. And now I'd want to call in the first panel. Allow me to just make sure I can do that, lest I lose my job up on stage. So please, and we'll take up the golf mode in this. No show, no prize. So please, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Juma Mukwana, where you, sir, Fatu Idara, Floyd Bukabana, Madam Phyllis Wakaga, Effie Akinyi, and Walid Harab. I think there was just somewhere here, if I'm not wrong. We can also have representatives just quickly come up for your gifts as well. And we thank you as well for your time. Yes, sir, please, Bonatori. Our Postmaster General, you need to be on stage as well. So please, Karibu. Thank you. Can I have somebody from the PS, a representative from PS Industry? Dr. Mukwana. Let me have a representative from his office. Okay, so Floyd will take two. So Floyd, please take one more for the PS. Can I get one more gift, please, for Able PS? Okay, we'll make sure that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy. Asante. Okay. All right, I have one more gift as well for the PS. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going into the final bit of our panel. We'd like to be done by about 5 p.m. But before that, please allow me to ask you all to please stand and stretch. I think you've been a great audience, and I'd want you now to just take a quick break to just stand, stretch, take a glass of water, and after which I'll have us started. Okay, shall we settle down, please? Okay, let's settle down. Okay, gentlemen, allow me to invite. We move as a pack. I think I introduced the earlier principal secretaries who are here, and now we're honored to have Mr. Alfred Kobudo, as the principal secretary in the State Department for Trade. If you could please appreciate him, give him a round of applause. I should mention to our visitors that now that marks the three principal secretaries making up the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. So thank you, sir, for being with us here today. He's going to be joining the panel on investment, trade and development. So allow me to hand it over to my fellow Exonian, Dr. Ted Moyer, who will now lead this discussion for the next about 20 minutes, and after which we'll wrap it up. A round of applause to my co-moderator, Ted Moyer.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of coming at the very back end of a long, long day for you. So we are running a tight ship, and hopefully I'm going to make this as quick and painless as possible. I'm very pleased to invite somebody that I've known for a while. And I'll start with the PS. I know this is a place where protocols need to be observed. So I'll start with Alfred. Please come up, and the rest of the panelists, feel free to come and grab your seats. And then we will proceed with this session. Anyway. May I please call upon Macharia and Lydia, please. Thank you. So this panel is on investment, trade, and development. And one of the fundamental questions that have been asked here is what really is the link between trade and climate? And what's the link between investment and climate? And how can these coexist? Do we have any development objectives that actually match or marry with our climate goals? And I do not think that I could ask for a better panel than this. So the format that we're going to take here is that we will ask the first question, the person will introduce themselves and answer the question, and then move on to the next one. I think for order, because I also do teach, we'll funnel down. We'll start from global perspectives, we'll then come to the continent, and finally we'll deal with very specific questions. So if that being the case, I'm going to very quickly ask, I'm not sure whether there are mics, there's a mic there. So the first question will go to the PS. And I'd like him to address a more global question. Then we'll move to the EU, then we'll move to Africa, and then we'll answer specific questions. So Alfred, please, what links do you see between trade and climate in your work? And what opportunities do you see for this topic?
Thank you very much, Ted. I call him that because I've known him for more than 10 or 15 years. My name is Alfred Kombudo. I'm Principal Secretary for Trade. I see lots of connections between trade and climate. The first connection that I see is that trade, particularly in the developing countries and also in countries that do a lot of manufacturing, is resource dependent. And when trade is resource dependent, naturally we look at whether it's depleting resources or not, and therefore trade has to be done sustainably. But at the same time, we do see huge opportunities also around that. We do see opportunities whereby we are having buyers of goods and services that are more keen on the environmental footprint of that which they consume. And therefore, we are also seeing that there's premiumization of goods that are produced sustainably, and there's also lots of focus on making sure that services are green. So from a trade and investment perspective, we see lots of opportunities to work with companies to basically produce goods sustainably, premiumize them, and make sure that they get into markets that are beginning to become more aware. It's easier said than done, though, because you need to use energy more efficiently for the manufacturing process. You need to subscribe to various materials that are less polluting. You need to be able to package your goods more sustainably. You need to make sure that you label your goods in a way that communicates to the consumer the effort that you've done. And you also need to ensure that logistics, trade, and transport equally are done sustainably so that these goods are able to get there. And that presents lots of opportunities, but lots of challenges for particularly small and medium enterprises that want to participate in the global economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that overarching introduction. We'll now move to a specific question, and forgive me, I'm not being irreverent or being too familiar because I've referred to Alfred as Alfred. I'll now ask the second panelist from the EU, Vincente, what is CBAM, what's its rationale, and what opportunities do you see for CBAM in this conversation?
Good afternoon, everyone, and first of all, I would like to thank Can Invest and all the organizers for giving us the opportunity to bring CBAM to the discussion here today. I have to say that my colleagues in the European delegation this morning reminded me that CBAM does not really apply to investments or to the companies in Kenya, because you don't export CBAM goods to the EU, at least for the moment. Just as a reminder, we are talking about aluminium, fertilizers, cement, iron, steel, electricity, and possibly in the future hydrogen. So, I mean, hydrogen is in the context or in the scope, so maybe Kenya has opportunities to become one of the importers or the exporters of hydrogen, green hydrogen, hopefully to the European Union in the future. But having said that, I think that CBAM is something which is important for everyone and also very meaningful for some countries in Africa. And I think it opens up many opportunities and chances. I know that we've been hearing from the beginning that some see CBAM as a threat or as a trade measure to protect the competitiveness of the EU industry. And I don't want to disappoint you that it's not a trade measure. I hope you will come out from here at least with one clear idea. And the reality is that CBAM is an environmental measure. Very, very quickly, the CBAM complements the carbon pricing that we have in the European Union since 2005, around 2005, which is the emission trading system in the EU. And the CBAM, what tries to do the CBAM is to apply the same carbon price, the same rules to the products I mentioned before, imported into the EU, so that all goods put on sale in the European Union are treated in the same way, whether or irrespective of whether they are produced in the EU or they are produced somewhere else. When I say it's a complement to the ETS, because the CBAM is intended to help the EU industry also to decarbonize, because it will put pressure on the EU industry to reduce emissions, because we will be eliminating the existence of some allowances in the emission trading system which are free at this moment or which are given free to the EU industry. And that, of course, will put a lot of pressure on the EU industry to decarbonize. As you know, the European Commission has announced, or the European Union has adopted its targets to become carbon neutral by 2050. But at the same time, what we want to make sure is that we give incentives to third countries to decarbonize and to the industry in third countries to go greener, because the lower emissions they produce, the lower CBAM they will pay. And there will be another incentive, which is introducing carbon pricing. I know that there are a lot of discussions in Kenya about carbon markets and also about ETS, voluntary markets, etc. I mean, the existence of carbon price around the world, of course, will be taken into account and will be deducted. So that's going to be also another incentive, not only to reduce emissions, but also to introduce carbon pricing and to get revenues, which will be very helpful to do the necessary green transition in all these countries. And the very last point, just to make the link between trade and environment so that you are not completely disappointed, we are developing now for 2026 the final methodology for the CBAM. Although the CBAM will apply from this year, from October this year, it will be only for collection of data, but no financial obligations. It will be only from 2026. We are now developing the final methodology. The methodology has to be applied to goods, because we are not importing installations. Normally, all carbon pricing measures or all methodologies around the world measure installations, emissions of installations. We have to apply to goods, and we have the aspiration that the CBAM methodology will be something that can be internationally used also for trade purposes. Our intention, of course, is to keep the burden to the minimum. And the burden will be on the importers, basically on the importers, because the importers are the ones who have to comply with the regulations.
Thank you very much indeed. I studied under the previous education system, and whenever anybody was asked a hard question, they used to say, with examples and diagrams, please illustrate your answer. So moving on to Gareth, based on that general overview of CBAM, please give the audience practical examples on how Africa may accelerate the application of CBAM, not only for exports, but for intra-African trade.
Sure, thank you. And my name is Gareth Walsh. I lead the energy and climate practice for the Tony Blair Institute. We have embedded advisors supporting political leaders across Africa and across the world. So I mean, a lot of the governments that we work with are starting to see the opportunity behind CBAM. I think CBAM presents a sort of longer-term opportunity for countries both to secure investment in renewable energy in the country, and clean energy in particular, but also sort of accelerate industrialization. So if you look at Africa, Africa has some of the largest untapped renewable resources across the planet, essentially. And at the moment, one of the big challenges to actually developing those resources is the off-taker. So who's going to buy the power? And we have a model at the moment that puts in most cases, is putting the sort of burden of buying that power onto utilities, which are by and large across Africa insolvent. So, that's sort of a fundamental challenge, and CBAM provides an opportunity to really sort of jumpstart that. I'd say it provides an opportunity basically provides the case for industries to come in, to tap that renewable resource. It provides a sort of an incentive for them to want to buy renewable power. But what's more, and more important in a way, is it also provides an incentive for them to potentially pay more for that renewable power as well. So just by way of example, we're working with the government of Mozambique. At the moment, Mozambique exports just over $1 billion of aluminium, a lot of that into Europe. In parallel, at the moment, Mozambique are developing a huge hydro project, so 1.5 gigawatts of hydro, about a $4 billion hydro project. The output from the project itself is far bigger than the Mozambican utility can consume. So they're essentially looking for the off-takers, who's going to buy this power. And CBAM represents a huge opportunity for them, because CBAM is, for the aluminium smelter that's in the country, it's actually providing the incentive for them to want to buy the renewable power, but it's also providing the incentive for them to want to pay more for it as well. Because whatever the difference is between the coal-based power or the dirty power that they could buy versus the renewable power, that's essentially a sort of margin when these things get imported into the EU. So I'd say it represents a huge opportunity. I mean, Mozambique is a slightly unique case because they have the aluminium smelter there, but I do think that it's indicative of what could happen across Africa, where you have governments who are prepared to seize the opportunity and put in place the sort of policies and the plans to adopt it. I'd say maybe just two other things about kind of the impact for this for within Africa trade. So one thing I think that this could spur is much more power trading, so trading energy itself. So the renewable endowment of Africa is not uniformly distributed. You have places like Kenya with its geothermal, or Ethiopia with its hydro, or Guinea with its hydro. So I do think that this represents an opportunity to be exporting that power to where it's needed to drive industries. And then the second thing I think it represents for Africa is, obviously Africa has huge endowments of natural resources. So if you take aluminium, you have the second largest deposits of bauxite in the world are in Guinea, right? So now Africa will be in a position where not only does it have the natural resources, but it also has the clean energy to develop and turn those into products and get the export revenue for itself.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I'm sure the audience has noticed that I've given you far more time than everybody else, because you're kindred spirits. I'm an international energy lawyer, and when someone mentions energy, I lose myself. So we've started, with the global stuff. We've come to the international stuff. We've looked at Africa. And now the next question will be on national law. And the question is a very broad one, Macharia. And it's, how may investment law, so we've come now to parliamentarians, how may investment law accelerate climate action?
Okay, thank you very much for that question and inviting me here. Now, in terms of investment law and climate change, we have to agree that investment law developed, the nature, the content, and character of it developed at a time when we weren't paying a lot of attention to environment and climate change. So climate change is now here, and we have to rethink and configure how investment law is conceptualized for purposes of two things. One, addressing questions about what do we do with high carbon intensives, and secondly, how do we accelerate climate responsive projects. So investment law, and law is a powerful tool in the sense that it regulates how businesses and trade activities take place. And you have to appreciate the central role at which it plays in terms of redirecting societies and changing societal behaviors. So the way I see it is, one, to discourage, and we've agreed as a society to move away from carbon intensives and move to low emissions and probably no emissions at all. So you have to see in terms of government and in terms of policies and laws, it has to play the role of incentivizing trade and investment that is carbon neutral. And secondly, so incentivize, promote, facilitate, and intentionally ensure that the benefits of the opportunities we are talking about go to every sector of the society. Because while as we are speaking about investments and trade, we have to always remember that the people who are affected most, even as a country here, are the most vulnerable, the people who live in arid areas, the women, for instance, because we are a resource-driven economy, for instance, so we'll have more women participating in agriculture, so we need to ensure that the law also does a distributive role. So in facilitating, the law has to facilitate trade and investment in the sense that it has to be positive in the sense that you have to attract investments. But secondly, it has to limit and discourage activities and that we're trying to learn away from. But more importantly, you have to play a distributive role because capital follows capital. So if we have also to think about how do we get to the most vulnerable persons even as we invest. And the investment law has to play those three functions even as we seek to develop as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There were certain terms that we learned during COVID, and one of them was segue. We started using certain cliches when we went on Zoom calls. So we will segue from law and move to policy and regulation and incentives. And I think, Lydia, first, permit me to say this. Thank you very much for saving us the embarrassment of having a manual today, because this is now, at least you represent a different gender. But secondly, I think you're handling an extremely pivotal question here. And the question is, how may policy and regulation, especially from a tax perspective, accelerate climate action on trade?
Thank you, Ted, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lydia Abala. I work at KPMG, taking care of tax and regulatory, with specific bias to our portfolio on the ESG agenda and climate change mitigation. And Ted, you're absolutely right. No matter how well designed our policies in Africa are, these are all likely to fall flat on the face if there's no political goodwill and regulation does not support that. And I'm happy that the panel before us was talking about climate change financing, because the financial sector leads the way. Really, if the banks and the insurance companies catch a cold, everyone else is likely to sneeze. So the first thing is the banking and insurance sectors will come a long way if regulated, in terms of just regulating some of these things like carbon credits and valuing them the right way, such that you can use carbon credit as financial security if properly valued, and you can even have that insured. So really, the ecosystem would be linked in such a way that investors who put their money in green investments are likely to be rewarded in the end. And the way the governments can do this is preferential tax treatments for those who put their money in green investments. And an example I'd like to give along this is last year, the government of Kenya gave a preferential tax rate of 15%, corporation income tax rate, for companies trading in carbon credits for the first 10 years before they move to the standard rate of 30% after 10 years. What this does is that it encourages the climate change financing that was talked about previously. And alongside this, there are a number of zero rating or exemptions for certain taxes like the VAT. And I'll just give a few examples coming from the new Finance Act that we have in 2023. Electric motorcycles, electric buses, and accessories for clean energy like solar panels have now been zero rated. So the government's putting their money where their mouth is really goes a long way. I've spoken about carbon pricing mechanism, and for this there's a challenge as well as an opportunity here in terms of there's need to find a standard way of pricing these assets such that the law is not only there, but it's also certain and is applied consistently. These are some of just the examples I'd give just to bring to life what the previous panel spoke about on climate financing. Because even as the investors come in, they really want to know the regulatory climate and the framework within which they are coming to operate. Yeah.
Well, last but definitely never the least, thank you for that beautiful answer. So I was given the arduous task of ending this by 5 o'clock. We only have about 5 minutes, and so I will have the pleasure of inviting Evans Lagat to come and show that this is not just a question for Kenya, because work around this has been done in the EAC, it's been done in West Africa, it's been done in South Africa, and Evans Lagat will come and close this session, just highlighting that. And so as he comes along, a round of applause for our very good panel. So I understand there's supposed to be a group picture with the panelists. I'm not sure whether I've gone at a much quicker pace than was anticipated. So Evans will come up first, and then we'll take the picture later. Thank you.
So, thank you, Ted. Good evening. Good evening. I should not be accused of keeping you here. I think Ted must be the one who's took the bill. But just to say a few words about the whole project about trade and climate nexus. About 30 years ago, when the UN, the Framework Convention, the UNFCCC, was being negotiated, the nexus of climate and trade was discussed, and hence you have what we call the response measures. At the same time, at the WTO, when it was being negotiated, and I would call them the framers of the GATT, the nexus of trade and climate was discussed. And hence, that's the reason why you have GATT Article 20. But if you ask yourself, all these years, 30 years, we've had the text of the various treaties speaking to trade and climate nexus. But we've never had a very concrete discussion, or a discussion at a very practical level. And it is just the other day that we had the Green Deal, which I think Vincente was talking about CBAM. And the essence of this is that we are at the decade of action to 2030. And hence, the main reason is climate action, which requires that there will be response climate action that would be interpreted as trade measures. I know, Vicente, you mentioned that CBAM may not necessarily be interpreted as being a trade measure. I think that is a moot question. Just recently, about 2 weeks, is it about a week or two ago, when the BRICS summit was being held in South Africa, one of the declarations was that CBAM is a trade measure. And so I want to, for this reason, we had a project that was funded by ClimateWorks Foundation, which was one of the first projects that was funded to look at the nexus of trade and climate change in Africa. I was part of the team that was looking into this, and we've had various conversations in various parts of Africa. The last roundtable that we had was in Cape Town, South Africa. We have outcomes from these roundtables, and I want to thank ClimateWorks Foundation, who have also supported the Africa Climate Summit financially. And I want to recognize Ms. Cherono Sego, who is a senior official of ClimateWorks Foundation. She's seated there, and has been part of the journey of the Trade and Climate Nexus. Together with her, we have the CEO of ClimateWorks Foundation, Helen Montford, and I will be giving her a few minutes just to say a few remarks before we go on. So, Helen, please.
Thank you so much, Evans, and thank you all for this wonderful discussion this afternoon. As Evan mentioned, a few years ago, we were looking at the intersection between trade and climate, and what we found in so many countries is that those who were working on trade knew little about climate, and those working on climate knew little about trade. But it was clear that the intersection here was going to become increasingly important. And so, thankfully, that we are able to help host a number of roundtables here in different countries and regions in Africa to really advance the discussion and understand where those intersections are, where we can advance with trade policies, investment policies that also support climate action and a livable future for all of us. This morning, I think President Ruto made a very compelling case for why green growth, green industrialization is really the future of growth here. And we know that trade and investment will be so essential. And hearing today the various panels, the speakers, the level of understanding and integration of these issues is so different from where it was just a few years ago. So we're very honored and pleased that we are able to support it in some small way. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your support. We've had these discussions from the ESC. We had it in Arusha with the East African community. We went to West Africa and finally to South Africa. And we had one earlier in Kenya. And the whole essence of all this conversation is that we intend to have this conversation to be elevated to the head of state discussion. And so what we are doing here today, I think is so critical and is so important that it then means that we'll collate what we have had discussions this afternoon for purposes of, forwarding to the various political platforms. Now, I had an AFCFTA director who was present, who just left, and had asked me to pass her regards because she was going for another meeting. But she's a director of investment, digital trade, and intellectual property. Of course, we've had this afternoon about the protocol on investment, which is basically trying to, put together a coherent governance framework for investment, starting with the bilateral agreements that we've had over the years, some of which have not been very, very conducive to African investments. So I think I'll leave it there, and I want to thank you all. I was part of the team that put this together, and I'm quite excited that this conversation is leading somewhere. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause, please, to Avis as well. Oh, Ted, you need to come up. I'm still getting into your panel. I think ably moderated. I don't know, any closing remarks?
The only closing remarks is thank you very much indeed for your patience and for participating. I wish I could give you an opportunity to ask many questions, but we'll get that opportunity later. Just a round of applause for our distinguished members of the panel. And then maybe I will just ask you to please stand so that we take the photographs. One of my hobbies is photography. One of the things I like the least is having my picture taken, but I will join you on this occasion.
Once again, thank you so much to our Principal Secretary, State Department for Trade, Alfred Kobudo, Vincent, appreciate it. Vicente, thank you very much. Gareth, Lydia, and Masharia, Asanteni Sana. That marks the end of our panel discussion. Okay, there you have it. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you to Ken Invest as well for sponsoring us with the lovely gifts. We really appreciate. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we now ladies and gentlemen, shall we all please be upstanding as we welcome the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, Honorable Moses Kura. Let's appreciate him, please, as he makes his way to the room. Thank you. You may all take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, just to give us an overview and for the benefit of our online audience, we began the afternoon looking at matters to do with the green investments and technology, ably moderated by Tracy, and after which delved into the climate finance mechanisms and just concluded looking at investment, trade, and development options that we have. I want to thank the Cabinet Secretary for joining us, of course, ably flanked by his principal secretaries in charge of trade and investment. At this point in time, it's without further ado, we're getting into the closing ceremony, if I may, of our Africa Trade and Investment Dialogue. So just for the benefit of Waziri and for him to really appreciate the discussions that took place, I'd like now to invite on stage Madam Smita Sangrajika. I hope I got that correctly. All right, close. So please correct me. Madam Smita, who's a partner for International Development Advisory Services, that's IDAS, from KPMG. She'll basically give a high-level sort of a summary to the panel's takeaways, and after which then I'm going to delve into the green investment projects where we'll have a signing ceremony up on stage. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, CS, PSs, and all the invited guests. It's really been an honor for KPMG. I'd really like to thank Ken Invest and Niti and the team for allowing us to collaborate and put this whole session together with Ken Invest and team. It's been really rich discussions. I think what's really been important today is the breadth and depth of discussions that we've actually heard. I think one of the key messages is getting practical. Of course, there's a lot we need to do, but we do need to get practical now and on the ground. And from the experience of my team working across Africa, working particularly in Kenya as well, I loved some of the key messages that came out. And I think today, and for the benefit of the CS, there's been deep discussions about green investments, climate finance, investment, trade and development, and the whole nexus with climate as well. But I think something that really struck a chord is that there's money there, there's climate finance there, there's investment, there's investors ready to come. But how are we making ourselves investor ready? How are we making ourselves more bankable? Not just looking at risks, but looking at the opportunities. How are we turning the risks into opportunities? I think there's a big story and narrative there. I think another key message is the breadth of it as well. We talked about climate mitigation and the need for investing in the big projects and renewable energy, for example. And we heard from potential investors who talked about the need, for example, of having an off-taker if they're going to invest in solar and big energy projects. On the other end of the spectrum, it was great to hear about climate resilience and actually looking at adaptation, because at the end of the day in Africa, we're working in big agriculture sectors, and there are the vulnerable that we need to look at, and we need to also address their needs. And how do we do that? There's philanthropic funding available. There's funding available to support capacity building as well. And one of the experiences we've had is, and we've managed over $1.2 billion helping across Africa, 400 grantees, for example, and businesses. It's one of the lessons we've learned is how the early stage funding and grant making to support the vulnerable also helps unlock potential, build capacity, build technical ability, and actually help scale them ready for big investment. And we've had the privilege of working on some of the names that we now hear across Africa, actually, and helping that seed funding to trigger that, and actually de-risking to create those opportunities. I think another message when we did hear from the waste management, and I really like that, is we have a tendency to look at design and build. But again, doing some of the investment attraction work that we've been doing, how do we do design, build, operate, and manage? How do we keep that reputation at the end of the day in the investments that are coming through? I think success will breed success. Better investments, big investments will create more bankable projects as well. And finally, I love that discussion that we had on investment law, actually, because not only did it talk about law, looking at it from the big spectrum of helping big business, but it also talked about how that will help develop skills and opportunities and address the needs of the vulnerable, women and young people. So I think that was a strong message in itself, that even when we're looking at law and investment law, we're looking at it from the whole spectrum of the big business that we need to spur economic development, growth, and create jobs, but also that we're meeting the needs of the most vulnerable that are being greatly and hugely impacted by the big climate challenge that we're having today. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for the collaboration, and I'd like to hand it back to the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Smita. Appreciate it. And of course, to KPMG as well for sponsoring this session for the afternoon. Also, just recognizing UNDP poster. We had the Postmaster General here as well, together with the chair lady as well. And last but not least, Trade and Economic Law Consultants for supporting this. A round of applause. I see you represented by Evans here as well. So just to make way as well to hear from the Cabinet Secretary, we're just going to go quickly into the green investment projects, just a high-level presentation, after which will be followed by the signing. So allow me to call up on stage Madam Priscilla. Madam Priscilla, to please come up. The Director of Agri-Oil Property, please, you can take the seat as well. Then we have Mr. Corner, the founder of Cool Go Green. Karibu sana. Last but not least, Mr. Kunmi Demuren, who's the founder of Vola Air Mobility. So it's very intentional that I bring them up on stage. They'll have a bit of a a quick fire 5-minute chat right here on the rostrum, and after which, when they're done, we'll just have a quick signing ceremony, which will mark the letter of intent with the Kenya Invest as well. So karibu sana. Who wants to go first? Ladies first. So Madam Priscilla Domika, so please come up on stage.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to say good afternoon, but it's definitely not afternoon. It's evening. My name is Priscilla Dimakato Mutlako. I'm from South Africa, and I belong to a company called Agri-All Africa International. Agri-All Africa International boasts 4,000 farmers on its platform, and we have our farmers in all over Africa and also globally. We are engaged in different agricultural practices using smart technology and top mechanization. Our latest project for us is Kenya. We are now based in the Tana Delta, and we have gone into rice farming, which is arguably the largest rice project in East and Central Africa, after West Africa, which is Nigeria, that boasts the largest rice project. So we are very happy to be here, and for this particular summit, we are talking about climate smart agriculture. And for us, this is very simple. It's an approach to farming that helps to address the challenges posed by climate change while promoting sustainable agricultural practices for increased productivity. So our aim is very simple: sustainable agriculture, using sustainable agricultural technologies that will help farmers adapt to climate changes for increased production. We are also looking at planned adaptations and mitigation to climate change impacts during the project. With this, we are going to look into growing climate-resilient crops, meaning that we bring in varieties that are resilient to different, to the change that is actually happening right now with, the change of weather patterns. We also are looking to adopting into water-efficient irrigation systems. At the Tana Delta, we have to use gravity water, and with the changes of the weather patterns, we definitely have to look into efficient irrigation systems. We also encourage sustainable farming enterprise of rice and livestock. At the Tana Delta, we have to deal with a community that has got pastoralists and farmers as well, and meaning that we need to work with them differently, meaning that on the farmer side, we have to look at an outgrowers project, bringing in the communities, giving them the right varieties of seeds, and not only that, making sure that we train them on sustainable agricultural technologies and innovations that are suitable to climate smart agriculture. We are also looking into enhancing agroforestry and planting of legumes or grasses, to cover crops to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That for us is super important. We're also looking at improvement of livestock management to reduce methane emissions. Other than that, we're looking into precision agricultural technologies to promote efficient farm resources use. Also sustainable increases in agricultural productivity and minimize negative environmental impacts. And we do this through automating application of inputs like seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, use of drones to minimize potential environmental and health problems of the farmers and consumers. We are also looking at automation of irrigation projects, which we call IoT, to help optimize water use. Like I said, it's gravity irrigation, and we need to make sure that we reduce water wastage and to improve water distribution uniformity. We are also looking into conservation agriculture to evaluate the planting of rice through zero and minimum tillage, digital fields leveling, adoption of rice system of rice intensification by reducing water through deficit, which we call intermittent irrigation technologies. More than anything else, what is very important for Kenya, we're looking into capacity building. So AgriAll Africa will carry out training and education on essential components of climate smart agriculture to ensure that farmers have the knowledge and skills needed to implement climate resilient practices effectively. In conclusion, AgriAll Africa through climate smart agriculture sees that it's crucial to ensure food security by reducing poverty, mitigating the impacts of climate change on farming communities. It represents a holistic approach that combines adaptation and mitigation strategies to create a more sustainable and resilient agricultural sector. So this is a lot of, like we said, you know, we talk a lot of vocabulary in English, but we have to be practical. We have to wear boots, we have to go on the ground, and the most important thing is what change do we bring, how do we work with the different weather patterns, the change of climate, how do we incorporate the communities, how do we create jobs, how do we bring in entrepreneurs and make sure that they are skilled to work under the new developments in terms of climate smart agriculture. Thank you very much, and we shall be waiting for more questions. Thank you.
Peter, you're next.
Oh, sorry. The most important thing that I realized I did not talk about is about the investment that AgriAll Africa is bringing into Kenya. So we are bringing in the next 5 years $102 million. And as we're talking right now, the President of the Republic of Kenya, President Dr. William Samoei Ruto, commissioned our project, and we have already started. We are on the ground, we are working, we are now on nursery stage. So we're just not here talking that we are an organization. We are on the ground, we have people working, we are employing people, and we are also skilling people. So by $102 million. Skilling people, creating an outgrow community, making sure that there's mechanization on the ground, using drones, and also creating entrepreneurs. I mean, in a nutshell, we did benchmarking at Moya. The Moya project is a total of 28 billion shillings every year. That is 32,000 acres. So can you imagine what we can do on a PPP project of 32,000 hectares in the long run? We shall definitely change the community at Tana Delta. And I think that's very excitable for Africans by Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, fantastic, Priscilla. My name is Peter Körner. I'm from Sweden, and I've been working with product development for the last 20 years. And today has been very, very interesting for me to listen to all the discussions and actually taking some notes of some words, some sentences that's been coming back and back. And let me repeat some of them. Renewable, sustainable, growth, agriculture, greenhouse gas, energy efficient, solar technology, creating new jobs, harvest and food waste, green manufacturing, lack of energy, local production, and then finally solution. So I think this is very, very interesting because the last word we're looking for solutions for many of those things. And I would like to add one more thing, and that is solar-powered cold storage, which we are working with. But let me give a little bit of a background. Today, 45% of all the fruit and staple food goes to waste. That's a fact. 45 to 50%. What does that mean? That means that your local farmer are actually losing 50% of his or her products. That's a big number. It's a really big number. And that adds up to $48 billion US dollars every year in waste, in money, just in Africa. And on top of that, if we also add the fact that it, furthermore, food waste contributes to 10% of the total greenhouse emission. And also, we see that in this global arena, we see that 1.5 billion people are lacking either access to grid electricity. So how can we get on top of this? So what we do at Google Go Green, we look at those numbers and see how can we sort of find a solution for this. And so I'm very happy to say that today we can present the Swedish groundbreaking patent technology, which is cold storage, totally solar-driven, and it can go totally off-grid, and it's up and running today. So this basically means that we go off-grid, we can, in different sizes, offer refrigerators, we can offer cool rooms, and everything with zero running cost, because it's all driven by solar panels. And some days we don't have sun, but with our energy storage, it can actually run without any additional power for 7 days. This could save a lot of waste food. So I'm also glad to announce that we're looking into it to launch this here locally in Kenya as our hub. And we believe in that we have to do it local. It's a Swedish tech technology, but we need to do it here in Africa. And our goal is that in the next coming 5 years, we're going to launch and release 40,000 of those units that can preserve staple food, fruits, for many, many people. And we believe that this can make a huge impact. And I also think that we can see that Kenya can be the hub, because it's not only here, it's in more places that we see this need. This is, in some sense, it's a global problem. So to do that for the next coming 5 years, we also want to invest in this. So we will look into investing $200 million US dollars under the coming next 5 years. And I think another thing that's very important to point out here is that this is also an opportunity to create new jobs. So we estimate that we will activate at least 5,000 people within agriculture, within tech,
As global warming continues to worsen, green transition is inevitable. Green aviation is absolutely essential in creating a sustainable environment for our current and future generations. Through continuous R&D, we can unleash the potential for a sustainable economic ecosystem in green aviation. Volar Air Mobility is endeavoring to bring pioneering green aviation technology to the forefront for societal benefit. Introducing a series of green aircraft, including the world's first commercially approved electric four-seater.
Volar aims to enable a green mobility option for sustainable development. Empower communities to participate in pioneering green aviation. Educate and bring awareness of decarbonization merits through a
safe, affordable, flexible, emission-free private aviation option. With a mission to lead the way in green aviation, Volar Air Mobility is dedicated to creating a better future.
US, but they really having the manufacturing here is the first time that the developing world will be providing solutions on climate to the developed world for adoption. So round of applause again for Africa. I have on there Henry Hoy, who's the chairman. He's an aviator and an environmentalist, and a lot of investments has gone into this, as you can imagine. But just think about what this means in terms of possibilities for Africa. Everything around ecotourism. And by the way, this has been adopted by Indonesia and Malaysia. This is what they use now to do tourism around those volcanoes because they want to reduce carbon footprints. So just imagine for Africa, Mount Kenya, the Masai Mara, all of the safaris that we have here. It's bringing a new experience, but with zero carbon emissions. So you can start flying guilt-free, right? And that's a big deal. The second thing for me is the application. So ecotourism, there's logistics. And on logistics I have in the house, I just want to recognize the largest cargo operator in Africa is Kenyan, by the way, in case you don't know. It's Astral Airlines. They actually do more cargo movement than DHL and KQ, and he's here, and he's accepted to pioneer this green electric aircraft once it comes to Kenya. Mr. Sanjeev Gadia, round of applause. Thank you. So once again, this is in the spirit of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya that was spoken about earlier today, and we really want to be able to live that. So once again, what's the objective? Is to provide safe, affordable, flexible, and emissions-free flying experience using this new technology. So I said I'll just have Henry say hello. He's right now in Hong Kong. You couldn't catch that flight. But Henry, you want to say hello to the crowd before I announce the commitment?
Good afternoon. Sorry, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Henry. I regret not being there, but Kumi is doing a fantastic job explaining our storyline. Now, in bringing pioneering green aviation technology into Kenya and into Africa, at Volar Air Mobility, we hope to empower the local communities to develop a pioneering green aviation ecosystem through knowledge and skills transfer. Secondly, enable the communities to develop in developing countries to have access to green mobility options. And thirdly, to raise awareness or educate on the merits of decarbonization, and in this manner, contribute to assisting nations to achieve their carbon neutrality targets. Many developed countries have achieved major progress in economic development through compromises on the environment over an extended period of time. At Volar, we hope to contribute by bringing pioneering green aviation technology to developing countries and enable our respective nations to leapfrog developmentally without compromising the environment. On that note, I'll turn back to Kumi.
Okay, thank you very much, Henry. So very quickly, what's most important is our commitment. And like I said, the last two speakers have thrown out some really big numbers, so we'll do our best. The board of directors have decided that in Africa over the next 5 years, we're going to be able to manufacture locally in Africa 1,000 aircraft, which translates to $250 million in investment in Africa. That would also translate to over 500 green jobs. And of course, in terms of the environmental impact, taking away or preventing 500,000 tons of carbon that would have been spewed into the environment if we used our regular internal combustion engine fossil fuel type aircraft. So that in a nutshell is a commitment, and we'll look forward to pioneering the future of green aviation in Africa, starting with Kenya. Thank you.
They definitely deserve another round of applause, and really to thank Priscilla, Peter, and Kumi for that stamp of approval as well. And here goes now putting into paper. So allow me to just quickly do a bit of a rejig here at the front, where we'll have a short signing ceremony together with Ken Invest CEO, Madam June Chepkemei as well, to come up. And then Pius, you're going to help me rearrange here. Just 1 minute. Sound 1, 2. All right. So we'll do it bit by bit. Of course, we'll start with Agri All Africa, Cool Green. So the table is set, and we have our 2 seats at the front. Madam June will represent the entire team from Ken Invest. So first up, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Priscilla from Agri All Africa, signing in the partnership. Just before they do, hold on. I'm advised that we'll have the cabinet secretary. All right, so duly advised. Let's have the 2 principal secretaries in charge of investment and trade to witness the signing of this agreement. So I'm going to ask P.S. Abubakar and P.S. Kobudo to please join the able team at the front. Karibuni. Madam Chair, please. Sally, to public demand. You could come up and witness. As a lawyer, of course, we need you to have an eye on what we are inking today. Karibu. All right, so there goes. This marks the first signing of the Green Investment Project by Ken Invest and Agri All Africa. A round of applause, please. Okay, just about it. Then the photo ops. Okay, sorry, can make do with. I'll get the reactions from our photographers, please, on the signing. Thank you very much, Ken Invest and Agri All Africa. Investment valued at $102 million, and thank you very much. The vote of confidence in Kenya. Asante sana. Thank you, Priscilla. Next up, please help me welcome Peter Kuhner, founder of Cool Go Green. Look at investment value at 200 million US dollars. I'll be invested over 5 years. Thank you. Now the exchange. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you to Coolgo Green and Kenny Invest as well for the partnership. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Kunmi from the Vola Air Mobility. And I don't know if Henry is still online and is witnessing this, and get well soon as well. Thank you again for the vote of confidence. The signing goes on. Is it still online? Oh, yeah, there you are. Thank you, Henry. Appreciate it. Duly represented here in Nairobi. Asante sana. Great. That marks the last deal with Inc. today on the green investment projects, spearheaded by Kenny Invest, of course, witnessed by the PS Trade, PS Investment, and our chairperson from Kenny Invest, Madam Sally. Thank you so much. I want to appreciate you all. So we'll all go for a group picture. Allow me. Okay, I'm advised we'll take the picture. One final round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. That marks the highlights of our investment dialogue here, from talk to action. So thank you very much to our three partners. Thank you as well to Kenny Invest and, of course, the entire team from the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. Asanteni sana. At this point in time, as I mentioned, we'd pass the apologies of the Cabinet Secretary, who could not join us earlier, but is here with us to witness this ceremony. And, of course, tell us, what next looking at the investment space, and ably to invite him on stage. PS Investment, Mr. Abubakar will now invite the Cabinet Secretary to give his remarks.
All right, thank you very much. You've been waiting for this moment, eh? The CS championing green investment, green industrialization, and green trade. He's very passionate about green economy and green jobs. So let me wrap it up a little bit. Yeah, in terms of sustainability, this is something which is enshrined in our constitution, embedded in our Vision 2030, and provided for in our bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And as far as climate investing or green investing and finance is concerned, we have done a lot in terms of greening our financial system. And this has facilitated the issuance of the corporate green bond in around 2019. And at that time in my previous life, I was involved in approving the same. And I know the government right now is working on a green treasury bond. The government is also working on greening the transportation system. You can see there are a lot of tax incentives in our Finance Act 2023. And we are also greening our industrial park to facilitate green manufacturing. So with those many remarks, let me now take the opportunity to invite the CS of Investment, Trade and Industry, Honorable Moses Kuria. Karibu Waziri.
Principal Secretary for Investments, Abubakar Hassan Abubakar, Principal Secretary for Trade, Alfred Kobundo, Chair of Kenny Invest and the CEO Management, our partners and captains of industry, good evening. First of all, let me take this moment to apologize because I could not be with you in the beginning. As you know, it's a very hectic time in Nairobi now, but I will take this belated opportunity to invite you all once again for the Africa Climate Summit 2023, which is taking place for the next few days here in Nairobi. And further, to welcome you to this forum as I close it, because it's very important. It's a very important component of the conversation that we are having on climate, on transition, and on the green situation in Africa. And we are proud as a country that for the first time, we have pioneered in creating a real African voice in matters climate. Not just a voice, but because we've not been on the table. And I want to echo what His Excellency President Ruto said this morning, that because now the real giant and owner of the climate discussion, which is Africa, because we have now on the table, these matters will be resolved now once and for all, because that has been the missing voice in this conversation. So as a country, we are very proud and we are taking a pioneering role in leading the African voice in the climate discussion. And our policy on trade and investment is actually centered around this topic of climate transition. I want to repeat something I've said this afternoon or this morning to some other group. That as Africa, we are paying a very heavy price because of climate change. If it is on the issue of drought, it is affecting Africans more than any other continent. Drought related directly to climate change. No other continent is spending so much resources in mitigating the effects of climate change as Africa is doing. Africa, just by way of statistics, we account for 22% of the world, of the mass, land mass in the whole world. 14% of the world population is in Africa. Africa accounts for only 2% of the GDP of the whole world. Africa contributes only 1% to the carbon emissions. And Africa receives only 1% of the green investment in the whole world. If you are looking for unfairness, nothing can be more unfair than that. And we have come to terms with the reality that we continue to be punished unfairly for mistakes of other people. We have come to terms with that. We have accepted. We have also accepted that we have got the highest contribution to the whole world, not to Africa, in terms of mitigating or in terms of providing the capabilities towards net zero. No other continent has got the potential to provide that capability more than Africa. So that role of having to overburden victims with the task of coming up with solutions, we have also accepted. What we have not accepted is that we pay for it. Somebody else has to. Yes, we have accepted to continue paying for the mistakes of other people. We have even accepted to contribute towards remedying that sad situation, but we cannot accept that we also have to open our checkbooks to mitigate that. For two reasons. One, it's unfair. And two, we don't even have the checkbook, even if we wanted to. So we're asking those people with the checkbook to to open the checkbook. One, because they have it, and secondly, because it is a morally right thing to do, because they are the ones who have created the problem in the first place. And so, as we sit here now to talk about trade and talk about investment, that is a philosophical, the ideological background on which this conversation is resting. We don't want to be entitled, and we are not entitled. And we will do everything possible to talk to everybody as politely as we can about the need to remedy these things. So we are not saying this because we are chest dumping or we are having a sense of entitlement. But we are saying this conversation must rest on a higher moral pedestal. So when we talk about trade, we talk about green investment, we are talking about, a fair approach towards discussing how do we move forward. We do not want to be revisionist. We cannot go back to the 14th century and start industrializing on fossil fuels yet again. We don't want to go back to the Stone Age. We don't even want to go back to the Industrial Age. No, we don't want to drive this vehicle with the rear mirror only. We want to move forward and we want to forge ahead. But for you to know where you are going, you must have, first of all, appreciate where you are coming from. And that is the context only under which we raise these issues to contextualize why we now need to have a fair trade, regime in the world. To talk about why we need to use capital, by the way, capital which has been accumulated on the back of that unfair history that I've talked about. Let us have our fair share of that capital, because after all, we have accepted our unfortunate role, which nature has consigned it to. So, Kenya welcomes fair investment, green investment. And we are doing everything possible to ensure that we create an environment which can be able to attract green investment. And because we are not entitled, we will continue to treat our investors, and especially green investors from all over the world, as if they never committed any mistakes. We will not do that. We will go out of our way to beg them, to be humble to them. We will not even remind them how they got their capital. We will be polite. All we are asking is, can we have a fair system from here going forward? 92% of Kenya's energy is green. Count these bulbs in this room. 92% of them are fueled by green electricity. So, in other countries, they can have green projects. Kenya, everything you do is green, automatically. I remember the other day I was in Doha speaking about this with some people from Qatar and other fossil fuel countries. And I was telling them we sit on the extreme opposite of each other. Because for those countries, 92% of their energy is from fossil fuel, even more than 92%. 92% of Kenya's energy is clean. And sometimes I am not happy with this. I sulk about the fact that that fact has not been amply recognized in the whole world. And I think we deserve a clap and a medal for that, I don't know why the world does not talk about this. I don't know why the world does not scream about one country, 92% of energy being green. That, this should be the headquarters of anything green, anything environment, if we are serious about this topic. And so it is befitting that we are having this conference in Nairobi. So we have created an environment and an infrastructure to unlock green investment, be it within our special economic zones, be it within our export processing zones, be it within our county aggregation and industrial parks, which we are setting all over the country. So for you, the investing community, should you want to come here, the door is open, and now you have got an address, you have got somewhere you can be able to report. On the issue of trade, because 92% of our energy is green, anything you export from this country, because we don't have oil as yet, is green. So you feel free to brand it. And we are going to start a conversation soon about how all the products coming from Kenya will be exported with a green label, because they are all automatically compliant. So if you want to invest here and you export from here, please feel free to demand for a premium in any global market, because your exports are coming from a country that is 92% green. So what's the way forward? I see the way forward here is just about practicality. Let us be practical. I am not very good at talking too much. I like people who are practical and who are doing things. On Friday last week, we launched our national e-mobility program in Mombasa for our two-wheeler motorbikes. Today, for those who are keen, the outriders or the convoy that drove our president from State House to KICC were all green motorbikes. That's, in my opinion, is actually walking the talk. So someone has to walk the talk. And for me, that is where my heart is. I'm very happy to hear some people, Priscilla, that you are on the ground. The best activation, the best round is on the ground. And now I want to, in the next 2 weeks, I want to come and visit your project in the Tana Delta, because that is the best lounge. He's not here talking a lot of English. Let us go to the ground and see things happening. I'm saying this because there is a danger. Because green sounds romantic. It is possible that we go branding everything green. For me, the best way of branding, the best way of launching, the best way of activating is let's do things on the ground. Because we are talking about many years of historical injustice to our people who continue to suffer from droughts, from food scarcity, because we didn't do these things before. So we don't have the luxury of time. We don't have at all the luxury of time. And the best friend of Kenya, and for me personally, the best friend of this ministry, are people who are here. Tell me what you need us to do. We are here to unlock. We are here to create an environment. We work 24 hours. This team that you see here, if you wake us up in the middle of the night and say you have got money, we can open the bank for you, that you can be able to bank. Because that is a conversation that ultimately we want to have. So guys, I am the minister in charge of investment, and I want to encourage people to invest in the hotel industry. We have got good conference facilities. We have got very good hotels, very good parks and all that. But sorry to say, we are not going to do investment inside the hotels. Let us get out of the workshops, out of the seminars, out of the five-star hotels, come to the grounds, go to the Tana Delta, go to our industrial parks, go to our special economic zones, go to our EPZ, and let's meet there and do business there. Business does not happen in five-star hotels. So please, guys, I'm saying this because God blessed me with many things, but patience is not one of them. So I am a bit impatient about the need to move this discussion faster, to move it quickly. And let me tell you something. The government of Kenya is already making very bold and practical steps in this direction. In the next 1 year, I am going to put 1 million electric motorbikes in the road. And you can hold my word into it. And for those who know me, when I say it, I do it. And I will do it no matter what it takes. Same conversation for the vehicle. We have got the model of our government is called the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, bottom-up. So, Kulmi, you can start from the aircraft, and I start from the motorbike, and we can meet somewhere in the middle. Because ultimately, Kenya wants to take leadership in this area. We are also brushing up our policy, our regulatory regime to be able to support green trade and green investment, and we are putting actual investment and going out deliberately to create a very enabling environment for anybody who wants to invest in green and anybody who wants to trade green from this country. So let me thank you all and welcome you to take some time and sample what Nairobi has to offer. Thank you.
Asante sana Waziri for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, my job here is done. I've been your able MC. My name is Laban Cliff, Chief of Staff in the Office of the Cabinet Secretary. Thank you so much to our Principal Secretaries as well for being with the boss. Appreciating Dr. Juma Mukwana, who could not make it for the closing ceremony, but was with us earlier. So thank you so much. Thank you to Ken Invest. Now let me hand it over to where the program belongs, right at Ken Invest, to represent, of course, the CEO in the closing remarks. Allow me to welcome Pius Rotich, who's the General Manager, Investment Promotions, to give the vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laban. My name is Pius Rotich, as you have been told. On behalf of the Ken Invest team, the board and the management, we actually want to thank the CS for creating time. We want to thank the PSS, of course, who have accompanied him, the partners, the panelists, and participants, and most of it all, the investors who have actually signed a deal for 552 million right now. So actually, we are going to places. We are going to report that out of this event, we have got 552 million USD plus 1,000 jobs and above. We want to assure you that the deliberations and recommendations we have made today, we are going to take them seriously. We will consider in our next steps going forward to make it actionable. And please remember to make it Kenya. And Kenya is the hub of the region. If you are going to do business in Africa, for those of us who have joined us from other countries, Kenya is a requirement. So you be in Kenya and you will be able to do business in Africa. Ken Invest is going to support you under our one-stop center, and especially for the 3 projects which have been identified today and signed today, we want to assure you that we are going to land them. So we would like to let you know that we look forward to great collaboration, and we are having another session tomorrow. We were lucky to actually be given another session tomorrow in the main summit, the 1-hour session starting from 12 to 1. And for those who are accessible to that place, you are all welcomed. And we want to also to request you, for those who would like to have a cup of tea, there's still tea for all of us. So be blessed, and congratulations, and may God bless you. Thank you. So we request Wasiri to leave first, together with the PSS, and then the rest of us we can follow.